So good evening, friends. Welcome to day 3 of the Six Sigma Masterclass Elite sessions. So the first 2 days we got properly introduced to the quality and the basic Six Sigma tools and techniques, or the basic Six Sigma concepts. And today we are going to step into the first phase in the DMIC approach, which is the define phase. So without any delay, let us get started. So let me just share my screen. Fine. So we'll click on the next sheet, title define. So what is the primary objective of this define phase? So first let us understand what is the primary objective of this define phase, and then look at the list of deliverables that we are supposed to adhere as part of the define phase. So the primary objective of the define phase is to define the business problem. So we have a business problem, so that is why we have taken up a Six Sigma project to address this business problem. So as part of the define phase, we need to identify what is that priority business problem, number one. And at the end of the define phase, we should have properly defined what is the business problem, right? So this is the business problem that I'm going to address as part of the Six Sigma project exercise. So let me just put today's date, this 9th of Jan. And there are certain deliverables which we need to adhere as part of the define phase. So the first deliverable will be to understand our customer. So again, the lean also we saw, right? When we discussed about the 5 principles of lean, we would always start by understanding the value expected by the customer. So here we are going one step kind of behind, in the sense we first and foremost understand who is our customer, right? So we all think that customer is someone who has given business to us. Obviously, that person is a very important part of the customer group. But customer, the definition itself has a much more wider term than this, right? So it's not only the person who has actually given us the business. There are certain other entities whom we have to consider as customer. So we will look at the definition of customer in detail, and also look at the types of customer as part of this. And once we have understood our customer, the next step would be to understand the customer requirements. So what are the customer requirements? So how to actually understand what the customer is expecting from us, right? So that is the second step. And the third step, so customer will have multiple requirements to be fulfilled, right? But then how to prioritize the customer requirements? So in order to come up with the prioritized customer requirement, we are going to use a model called Kano model. Again, Kano model is invented by the Japanese quality expert by name Noriaki Kano. So we will use this very simple model and try to understand how to prioritize the customer requirements. So once we have prioritized the customer requirement, and if you are falling short of it, then that would be taken up as a business problem, right? So if you are prioritizing the customer requirement, and if you find that we are falling short of fulfilling that customer requirement, then that has to be addressed as a business problem, right? So through this exercise, we will also identify the priority business problem, and we need to come up with a metric called CTQ metric. So the full form is critical to quality, right? So what is this metric? So this metric would help us to quantify that business problem in numerical terms. So we will not know how big the business problem is, right? So in order to quantify the business problem, we need to measure the business problem in terms of a certain metric. And that metric name is what we would call as critical to quality, right? So this metric would help us to measure the depth of the business problem in numerical terms, right? And then we will perform an exercise called CTQ drill down, right? So once we have measured the overall business problem in numerical terms, there are certain, or there could be certain areas in the process which might be, contributing to this overall business problem. So the overall business problem might pertain to the entire process. Say, for example, the process accuracy percentage may not be looking all that great. It might be falling short of the customer expectation. But then there could be various sub-processes within that process. And it is not as if all the sub-processes would be pulling down the overall process performance. So there could be few sub-process areas which might be pulling down the overall process performance. So when we perform the CTQ drill down exercise, the idea is to identify those sub-process areas which are actually pulling down the overall process performance so that I would be able to focus on these sub-process areas for necessary improvement as part of the Six Sigma project. Because as I told you on the very first day, Six Sigma is a time restricted exercise. So we cannot, work on a Six Sigma project endlessly, right? We need to, complete the Six Sigma project successfully within that agreed timeline. So that being the case, we need to choose the right battle, right? So why unnecessarily tamper with certain sub-process areas which are already performing well? So we obviously need to identify the sub-process areas within the process which are actually pulling down the overall process performance. So that is the main objective of performing this CTQ drill down exercise. Again, all these deliverables that we are going to see in each and every phase, so we need to know the objective behind that exercise. So nothing is done for the sake of formality, right? When we execute a Six Sigma project, right? So nothing is done for the sake of formality in a Six Sigma project. So each and every exercise that we would perform has a certain objective, right? So as a black belt, we need to be aware of the objective behind each and every exercise that we would perform as part of our Six Sigma project exercise. Very, very, very important. Sometimes, when you used to sit for these review meetings, project review meetings, the project team would have actually prepared, the SIPOC diagram or the process flow diagrams, etc. So when I question them, right, as to why they have actually prepared this and what is the objective behind this particular exercise, they would merely say that this is required as part of the Six Sigma project. So this is a formality that we need to fulfill as part of the Six Sigma project. That is not the truth. Each and every exercise that we would do as part of our Six Sigma project has a definite meaning. So as a black belt, we need to be aware of it. So when we perform the CTQ drill down exercise, we need to come up with the result. So it is not as if we need to perform this and then leave it as it is. So what is that we are trying to infer from this particular analysis is something we need to specify at the end of that slide. So the objective behind each and every exercise needs to be properly understood. So once we have identified the problem areas within the process which needs improvement, we will prepare, or the project team will prepare, an introductory document for any Six Sigma project called Project Charter. So this is a very, very important document, right? Project Charter is a very, very important document because this project charter document will be presented to the leadership, right? In order to obtain their approval to proceed with the project exercise. Because Six Sigma project is a very special initiative, right? So this has to be approved by the leadership. Only then the project team will be able to work on this project exercise. So that being the case, how to get the approval from the leadership team? So the project team will have to prepare this introductory document called project charter. So project charter will be prepared and it will be presented to the leadership team for them to provide necessary approvals to the project team to proceed with the project exercise. Only after this, the project team will be able to proceed further because Six Sigma would require some kind of a focus, some special focus to be provided. So some time to be spent. So when people spend some time, it could be an additional time apart from the routine work that the people might do, or there could be a special team which would be formed for executing the project exercise. So obviously there has to be some kind of a time sponsorship which has to be approved by the leadership team. And for that, we will The project team will actually present this project charter document and obtain that approval. And then once the approval is given, as a first step, the project team will work on a high level process flow or a macro level process flow called SIPOC. So the expansion of SIPOC is supplier, input, process, output, customer, right? So the linkage of supplier, input, process, output, and customer is what we would look at in this SIPOC diagram. So SciPOC is primarily a scoping tool. So it would help us to understand what is the in scope or what are the in scope areas within the process that we are considering for necessary improvement, right? So once the SciPOC diagram is created, then we will also create what is called the as-is micro level process flow. And this is basically done to identify the lean opportunities existing in the process. So as I told you on the first and second days of this training session, so whenever we work on a Six Sigma project, our focus would be to first and foremost identify the known causes and attack the same. And for that, we would be applying the lean tools and techniques in order to perform all these lean improvements, right? So, how to identify the lean opportunities within the process? Obviously, we need to have the process diagram or the process flow. So, the micro level as is process flow is what we would create in order to identify the lean opportunities existing for me within that process. So yesterday itself we had a brief discussion as to what is called as a as-is process flow. So as-is process flow is nothing but the depiction of the process as it is being executed in the shop floor. But then the process that is depicted in the process document will be called as ideal process flow. So obviously the ideal process flow is the one which should be executed in the shop floor it's also. But unfortunately, as I told you, over a period of time, the people who are working that process would have actually inadvertently added few more process steps. So it's always better to consider the as-is process flow which would depict the process as it is being executed in the shop floor for necessary improvements. So that is why for identifying the lean opportunities existing within the process, we will consider this as is process flow. Once we identify the lean opportunities and work on all those lean improvements, we would be able to improve the process performance up to a certain extent. But then in a Six Sigma project, you would remember we would have fixed a breakthrough goal, right? So the goal that we would have fixed would have been a breakthrough improvement. So that being the case, we wouldn't be able to achieve that goal merely by performing the lean improvements. The lean improvements will enable us to improve the process up to a certain extent. But beyond that, when we want to improve further, we would need to apply the Six Sigma tools and techniques. So this is the final deliverable as part of the define phase, right? So you look at all these deliverables in detail one by one. So first, we need to understand our customer. And for that, we need to define who is our customer, right? So who is our customer? Customer is someone who has given business to us, which is quite obvious, and slash or. So it could be one of these two sentences. So and slash or could be someone who gets impacted by the output delivered by us. So there are two parts in this customer definition. So customer is obviously someone who has given business to us and could be a combination of the other sentence or could be one of these two. And that is why I written and slash or. So and slash or could be someone who gets impacted by the output delivered by us. So the customer may not have given business to us, but might get impacted by the output delivered by us. So we need to treat those entities also as our customer. So from that perspective, you see, we can actually segregate the customers into two types. So what are the two types of customers that we have? External customers who are external to our organization and internal customers who are internal to our organization. So two types of customers, external customers and internal customers. So external customers are external to our organization and internal customers are internal to our organization. So as part of the external customer group, obviously we will have the customers who would have given business to us, right? So they could be external to our organization. So we can easily recognize them as well. In fact, we all work for them. But then we also need to think about the government bodies. So these government bodies would have formulated the rules and regulations under which the organization is supposed to function. So, if you are working in a certain country, we need to understand the local laws, right? Whether the output that is produced by us is adhering to the local laws or not. That is very, very important, right? So, the government bodies are the ones which would be formulating the rules and guidelines for the organization to perform. So, obviously, the output delivered by the organization should be in line with the local laws of the government. That is very, very important, right? So the government bodies also would get impacted by the output delivered by that organization. So from that perspective, the local government bodies needs to be treated as a part of our external customer group. And then, of course, we will have the shareholders, right? So the shareholders are the real owners of the company. So they could be external to the organization as well, right? Some external person might have invested in that company and they would obviously get impacted by the quality of the output that is delivered by us. Imagine a scenario where the quality of the output is not all that great. So what will happen? Obviously, the customers who have given business to us will slowly withdraw their business from us, right? And they'll look out for some other service provider. And when this happens, the revenue is going to fall down. When the revenue falls down, it will have a serious impact on the profit margin. If the profit margin is going to fall down, then the shareholders will not get any dividend. So, dividend is the income that is distributed to all the shareholders. So the shareholders will definitely not get any dividend if the profit margin is going to fall down or if the company starts making losses, right? So obviously the quality of the output that is delivered by the organization will have a huge impact on the shareholders' prospects. So hence shareholders also would be part of the external customer group. So these government bodies, shareholders, they may not have given business to us, but they are getting impacted by the quality of output that is delivered by us. So they would be forming part of this external customer group. And there is an internal customer group. So all these entities that we are going to look at as part of the internal customer group would obviously get impacted by the quality of output that is delivered by us. So as part of the internal customer group, we can say our immediate supervisor or manager, right? So they would definitely get impacted by the quality of output that is delivered by the team. So if the team is going to come up with some bad quality output, we cannot judge the supervisor or the manager who is managing that entire team to have dished out some good performances. So we cannot rate the performance of the team as very bad, and we cannot rate the performance of the supervisor as or manager who are kind of leading that particular team as excellent, right? That cannot happen, right? So the manager and the supervisor will be as good as the team itself. So the team's performance is good, the credit will be given to them as well. If the team's performance is not all that great, then they will also be impacted by the team's performance. So the immediate supervisor or manager obviously will get impacted by the quality of the output that is delivered by the team. And of course, the leadership team. So the leadership team will be the top management in that organization will definitely get impacted by the quality of the output that is delivered by the various teams within the organization, because the leadership team, the main KRA, right, would be in terms of the profit margin. So they are supposed to make some good profits. So that would be their objective. That would be their goal, right? So it's said in a lighter vein, right? The leadership of any organization can understand only one language, that is a dollar language. So they will always think about, how much revenue this particular initiative can bring to us, or how much will be the increase in the profit margin because of this initiative, or how much will be the cost because of this deviation, and how it is going to impact the profit margin. So this would be their thought process. So when the quality of the output delivered by the teams within that organization is not all that great, it would certainly impact the interests of the leadership team, right? So when the quality is not good, as I told you, the customers would definitely look out for some other service provider. In that case, the revenue is likely to fall down, the profit margin is also likely to fall down, and it would definitely impact the prospects of the leadership team, right? So that is another entity which would definitely get impacted by the quality of output that is delivered by the organization teams. And the third entity within the internal customer group is the downstream processes or the downstream activities. So when we have the activities arranged in a series like this, right? We have seen this several times before. So again, one more time to understand how the downstream processes or the downstream activities are going to get impacted, right, by the quality of output produced by the upstream processor. Say, for example, as I told you, when we have the activities arranged in a series like this, one after another, the quality of the output that is delivered by A will definitely have an impact on B. Similarly, the quality of the output that is delivered by B will have an impact on C, because the output delivered by A will be the input for B, and the output delivered by B will be the input for C. We all know this, right? So, if A is going to commit a lot of mistakes, what will happen? Then B will end up correcting all those mistakes, or B will have to send the output back to A, asking A to correct the mistakes and then send the clear output to him, right? Similarly, if B is going to commit a lot of mistakes, then C will end up correcting all those mistakes, or C will hand over that output to B, asking B to correct all those mistakes before sending the output to him. So the B and C, as the immediate downstream processors, will definitely get impacted by the quality of output that is delivered by their respective upstream processors, right? So when that being the case, as per the quality definition, we are saying that a person could be someone who gets impacted by the output delivered by us. So from that perspective, B as an immediate downstream processor for A will get impacted by the quality of output delivered by A. So from the customer definition perspective, A will have to treat B as his internal customer. Why I'm saying internal customer? Because they all would be part of the organization. Similarly, B's output will have an impact on C, right? The quality of output that is delivered by B will have an impact on C, and hence C will have to treat B as his internal customer, or B will have to treat C as his internal customer, right? So C is going to get impacted by the quality of output delivered by B. So hence B will have to treat C as his internal customer. So if only the upstream processors are going to treat the immediate downstream processor as their internal customers, we will not face lots of quality issues in our processing team, right? So imagine a scenario where A is going to treat B as his internal customer and is going to be extra careful while delivering the output to B, because A might think that if B is going to identify those errors, then it would be a black mark for A. If that is the thought process, A will be focusing on producing quality output to B. But if A is going to think that there are a couple of downstream processes down the line, and even if I'm going to commit any mistakes, so these downstream processes are there to identify those mistakes and correct them before the output is delivered to the customer, then A will not be focusing on producing quality output, right? And this is the root cause for majority of the quality issues faced by an organization. So if you really dig deep into it as to why this particular deviation has happened, it will always point out to some kind of a deviation at the upstream stage of the process. So the upstream processors will take it very lightly because they know that there's so many people down the line. So even if they are going to commit any mistake, so these people are there to actually identify those mistakes and correct them before the output is delivered to the customer. Whereas C doesn't have that luxury because after C, there is no other processor down the line. So after C, the output is going to get delivered straight to the customer. So C will be taking extra care in ensuring that he processes correctly without any defect. But then A, as a upstream processor, might actually think that there are a couple of downstream processors down the line. And even if I'm going to commit any mistakes, these guys are there to identify those mistakes and correct them before the output is delivered to the customers. That is the thought process. Then obviously, A will not focus on producing quality output. But the thing here is, if A is going to treat B as his internal customer, then A will take extra care in producing quality output and delivering it to B, right? Because A would think, even if B is going to find out some mistakes committed by me, it would be taken very seriously. So just like how A would respect and fear the customer who has actually given the business, the same kind of respect and fear needs to be there for the immediate downstream processor as well. So if they are going to identify the mistakes committed by me, then it is going to be a black mark on my performance. If this is the thought process, then A will be extra careful in ensuring that he produces quality output. Clear? So this is not happening in most of the organizations. That is why we face lot of quality issues in these organizations, because the upstream processors will always take it very easy. So they would think that there's so many people down the line. So even if I'm going to commit a mistake, so people are there to rectify those mistakes, right? So B could be a close friend of A. There's no, double thought about that, right? So B could be a very close friend of A. But then when it comes to process, A will have to treat B as his internal customer. Similarly, B as an immediate upstream processor for C will have to treat C as his internal customer. Only if this thought process is there in A and B, they will be extra careful in ensuring that they produce and deliver quality output. Clear? So how downstream processes or downstream processors will be part of the internal customer group. So this thought process has to be instilled in each and every employee working that process. You can very well understand, who could be there down the line, right? So you would be part of your process chain. So who is the next immediate downstream processor? Are we treating our immediate downstream processor as our internal customer or not? Right? That's a question mark. So what will happen if they are going to identify the mistakes committed by me, right? So am I going to get penalized because of that? Am I going to feel sorry because of that? Am I taking extra care in ensuring that I produce quality output and deliver the same to my immediate downstream processor? So all these questions have to be answered, right? So if only the upstream processors treat their immediate downstream counterparts as their internal customers, majority of the quality issues, as I told you, can be solved in an organization. So that is what I've written. So the internal customers need to be treated on par with the external customers. So we would fear the customer who has actually given the business to us. We would fear the government bodies because the penalty that would be imposed by the government bodies will be very, very severe. And we would also fear the shareholders who are actual owners of the company. But we will show little fear and respect for the people who are internal to the organization. So what is the important thing here is the internal customer needs to be treated on par with the external customers. So very, very important. So that is why in a Six Sigma project, we need to come up with a one slider with regard to the stakeholders who are concerned with our project exercise. So obviously the customer who has given business to us will be definitely concerned with the output of our project exercise. But apart from that, person who has actually given business to us, or apart from that company who has actually given business to us, as I told you, there could be other stakeholders involved in this project exercise. So the stakeholder analysis that we would perform at the beginning of the project exercise should cover all external and internal customer groups, right? So they would be looking at our project with lots of interest. The leadership team, the immediate supervisor or manager, and simply the downstream processors. All these people would be definitely looking at this with lots of interest and concern. So the stakeholder analysis would include, all these entities. So the main thing here is the internal customer group needs to be treated on par with the external customer group. So once we have understood our customers, who could be internal and external, the next step would be to understand the customer requirements, right? So how the customer requirements can be gathered? So the obvious source would be contracts or agreements. So the customer who has given business to us would actually enter into a contract or agreement with the service provider, and the customer would have specified what are all the things that he or she is expecting from the service provider, right? So that would be detailed as the list of clauses in these contracts or agreements. So the service provider team or the manufacturing team can actually look at the contracts or agreements and understand what the customer is actually expecting from them. Then the review meetings that we will have with our customers on a periodical basis is another source of gathering information about the customer requirement. So we would definitely understand whether the customer is actually happy with our performance or not. So I've seen, many of these operations teams, will feel extremely happy if the review meetings with the customers are getting cancelled, right? So we need to understand the review meetings with the customers are conducted for our own interest. It is not for the benefit of the customer. In fact, it will be very difficult for us to pull the customer into our meetings, right? The customer would have handed over the business to us and they would be relaxing. So it will be very difficult for us to pull them into all these meetings. But it is out of our own interest that we need to have our customers part of these review meetings, so that in case we are not performing as per the customer expectations, we will get to know in these review meetings, right? The customers would be very, very candid in their feedback, and they will tell very clearly as to whether we are performing as per their expectations or not. So if these review meetings are not conducted with the customers, what will happen? So we might be internally thinking, as service providers, we might be thinking that we are doing a fantastic job, right? So no one will, actually think that he or she is doing a bad job. So everyone would tend to think that he or she is doing a great job, right? So internally, we would be thinking that we are doing a great job, but then the customer would be having a contradicting viewpoint, and we would not be able to gather the customer feedback if we are not going to have these review meetings conducted with them on a periodical basis. And at the end of the year, when the contract is due for renewal, the customer will throw a surprise saying, "We are not satisfied with your performance. We are going to look out for some other service provider." Right? So this would come as a surprise for us, because internally we would be thinking we are doing a great job and the customer is extremely satisfied with us, right? But the customers would be having a contradicting viewpoint. So that contradicting viewpoint will not be made known to us, right, during the course of the year, and we will come to know only at the time of contract renewal. At that time, the customer will throw a surprise saying, "We are not satisfied with your performance. We are going to look out for some other service provider." So that kind of a situation should never happen. So these review meetings, which would be conducted on a quarterly basis, right, would serve as a very good platform for the service provider team to gather what the customer actually thinks about our performance, so that, in case of any course correction is required, the service provider team will be able to perform those course corrections before the end of the year. So that is very, very important. So review meetings are going to be extremely important, and we should not be feeling happy that the review meetings with the customers are getting cancelled. And the third source for gathering the customer feedback is through CSAT surveys. So CSAT, the full form is customer satisfaction, right? So we will float all these surveys to a larger customer group. So even these review meetings, only the customer representative would be part of it. But then when we are floating the CSAT survey, so we would be able to cover a larger customer group. So we will, come up with the survey questionnaire, soliciting feedback from the customer who would have used our product or service, and we would get to know whether the customers are happy with our product or service. So in case of any course correction required, so we would be able to do so right before the contract term actually ends. So this is another way of gathering the customer feedback. Only thing is, we will not be able to conduct these CSAT surveys quite frequently because the customers will not be interested in providing you with a response every now and then. So it has to be conducted, say, once in 6 months or once in a year kind of a thing. So the frequency may not be all that too frequent. So it will be conducted, as I told you, once in 6 months or once in a year. So that is the only hitch with the CSAT survey. Otherwise, you will not get some good response from the customer team, right? So you may plan to conduct this on a monthly basis, but you may not get a good response. If you're not getting a good response, then there is no point in conducting this customer satisfaction survey, right? So these are some of the sources through which we will be able to gather the customer requirements. But then the process of gathering the customer requirement or the customer feedback is what we would call as voice of customer, right? So this voice of customer in short is referred as VOC. You might have heard about this voice of customer. So how to gather the customer feedback or the voice of customer? There are, again, some three sources through which we will be able to gather this customer feedback. Was CSAT surveys one such source. Apart from that, we have this historical data analysis. So what is this historical data analysis? Let me give you a simple example. So the customer has given the accuracy percentage target as 99%, right? The customer has given the accuracy percentage target as 99%. So I'm considering accuracy percentage as the metric here because all of you would be able to understand this because almost all of you would be tracking this metric as part of your process performance as well, right? So that is why I am quoting this metric called accuracy percentage, which is a very common and a standard metric. Say customer has given the target for accuracy percentage as 99%, but then the historical data analysis shows that your current performance is only 96%. So last 1 year you have been performing only at 96% levels. So that means you can clearly understand that the customer may not be happy with your performance, right? Because you are falling short of the customer expectations. So the historical data analysis wherein we would calculate the CTQ metric performance. Here in this case, it is the accuracy percentage. The last 1 year or so would help us to understand where do we stand with respect to the customer's expectation. So if you are falling short of the customer expectation, then we can understand that the customers may not be happy with our performance, even though the customer may not have explicitly, informed you about their displeasure, but still we can expect. So 99% is the expectation of the customer, but our performance says we are at 96% only. So obviously there is a quality gap, so which we need to bridge as quickly as possible. So the historical data analysis would obviously let us understand whether the customer would be happy with our performance or not. The next one is the market research. It's a very common approach, right? So as and when we float our product or our service, right, and the customers start, using our product or our service, then we can always conduct a market research to find out whether the customers are happy with our product or service. So market research is a very, very common practice which would help us to gather the customer feedback. But the third one is a unique one. It's called mystery shopping. So what is this mystery shopping? Right, it's a new technique. So the mystery shopping is all about the leadership group of the organization engaging a consultant to act like a customer. So they would engage a marketing consultant to actually act like a customer. So this consultant, right, who is acting as a customer would visit the various sales outlets of that organization. So sales outlet is the place where the organization's product or services will be sold to the end customers, right? So this consultant who is acting as a customer would be visiting the various sales outlets of that organization and would gather information from the sales team as to whether they are promoting the product in the right way or not, whether they are talking about all relevant features about that product or service, right? So whether they are covering all the important and critical pointers about the product or service is something the external consultant would actually gather through this mystery shopping exercise. So that is one part of the story, whether the sales team is coming up with the correct information about the product or service. The next part of the information that they would gather will be the performance of that product or whether the customers are happy with the service provided by that organization or not, right? So they would interact with the fellow customers who would have assembled right near that sales outlet area, and they would interact with them and try to gather whether they are happy with the product or the service floated by that organization, right? So in fact, if an organization representative is going to conduct an interview with the customers and then ask for their feedback, some of the customers would not want to embarrass the organization representative. So they would talk only about the positive aspects of that product or service, and they will not come out with the negative aspects. But then, if a fellow customer is going to ask for a feedback about the product or service, then the other customer will be candid in providing the feedback because they, in case they are not satisfied with that product or service, they would be very, very candid with their opinion. They will say that this is the or these are the negative aspects of this product or service. So I would strongly recommend not to really go for this product. So please try out something else. So like this, they would give a candid feedback to the fellow customer because they would not want their fellow customer to actually fall into that trap. So obviously they would warn them in case they are not happy with the product or service that is delivered by that organization. So when these consultants acting as customers interact with the fellow customers, they would be able to obtain candid feedback about the product or service delivered by that organization. So with all these information gathered, so these consultants acting like customers would prepare a report and then provide it to the management for them to take necessary action. So this is the entire gist of the mystery shopping exercise, which is a very, very unique one. So there can be a question on this. So the question would be the voice of the customer would include. So they would have given these three as options: historical data analysis, market research, and mystery shopping. And the fourth option will be all of the above. So we need to pick all of the above as the correct option because voice of the customer would include historical data analysis, market research, and mystery shopping, all three of them. So all of the above will be the correct option. And once we have gathered the customer requirements, as I told you, we need to look at prioritizing these customer requirements through a model called Kano model. So Kano model is a very simple graphical representation as we can see on the screen. So first we will look at, what are all the various contents in this Kano model. And then we'll also look at a very simple exercise, how to perform this Kano model exercise and then come up with the various categories of the customer needs. So the Kano model is a graphical format, as I told you. So we will have the y-axis, which is a vertical line in the graph, and x-axis, which is a horizontal line. So obviously, when we have this graphical format, we will have, 2 or 4 compartments to be precise. But then if you are, having the x-axis as the separator, then we will have 2 compartments, one on the top and one at the bottom. So the top one is called the satisfaction half, and it is indicated by the plus sign. Because if you take the y-axis, right, those who are familiar with all these, graphical formats would know this. So if you take y-axis, so all positive values for the y-axis will be at the top and all negative values will be at the bottom. So here the bottom half will be considered as the dissatisfaction half, and it is indicated by the minus sign. Similarly, if you look at the x-axis, which is the horizontal line, all positive values will be written on the right-hand side and all negative values will be placed on the left-hand side. So the center point will be 0, right? The center intersection point will be 0. So here if you look at the Kano model, the right-hand side of the y-axis, the right extreme, or right-hand side of the x-axis, the right extreme, we have what is called functional. So what is this functional? Functional would depict the scenario where the customer needs are fully fulfilled. So functional would depict the scenario where the customer needs are fully fulfilled. And the left extreme, where we will have all the negative values for the on the x-axis, we have what is called dysfunctional. So what is dysfunctional? This is a scenario where the customer needs are not fulfilled at all, right? So the two extremes. The right extreme, we have a scenario where the customer needs are fully fulfilled. The left extreme, we have a scenario where the customer needs are not fulfilled at all, right? And as per Kano model, the customer needs are segregated into three types. So what are the three types of customer needs? The first one is the must be need, which is denoted by this curve entirely in the dissatisfaction half, the one that I am pointing on the screen. So this curve would represent the must be need. So this is entirely in the dissatisfaction half, right? And the second category of customer need is the one dimensional need, which is represented by the slope, right, passing through the center. So one dimensional need is represented by the slope passing through the center, right? And then the third category of customer need is delighter. So delighter needs, as we can see, is exactly opposite to must be, right? So delighter needs is represented by this steep curve, which is placed entirely in the satisfaction half, right? Now let us try to understand the characteristic of all these three categories of customer needs. So the characteristics of all these three categories of customer needs. So first let us look at the must be needs. So must be needs are those which are like, if it is fully fulfilled, if must be needs are fully fulfilled, the customer is not going to feel satisfied about it. You still see the must be need curve in the dissatisfaction half. It has not stepped into the satisfaction half. So even if it is fully functional or if these needs are fully fulfilled, the customer is not going to be satisfied. But then, if must be needs are not fulfilled, the customer will be highly dissatisfied. So if it is going towards the dysfunctional side, we see a steep curve, dissatisfaction curve for the must be need. So must be needs are those which are like, even if it is fulfilled, the customer is not going to feel satisfied. But if it is not fulfilled, the customer will be highly dissatisfied. So this is the primary characteristic of must be needs, right? So we can clearly understand that must be needs would be the critical priority. So that is why it is written as critical priority. So as a service provider or manufacturer, I cannot compromise on these must be needs. These are like your basic functionalities of a product or service, right? So we cannot afford to miss them. So you might provide all other features, right, with regard to that product. But if you are going to miss out on that basic functionality, the customer is going to be highly dissatisfied. Just because you have provided the basic functionality need, it is not as if the customer is going to feel satisfied. Because as I told you, the customer will take it for granted that the basic functionality need is anyway supposed to be given. Just because you are able to make or receive calls through mobile phone, will that satisfy you as a customer? Definitely not, right? But on the other hand, if you are not able to receive or make calls through that mobile phone, then you will be highly dissatisfied as a customer. So must be needs, as we can see, are of critical priority. And the next one is the one-dimensional need, which is also called as a satisfied need. So it is represented, as I told you, by the slope passing through the center, right? So it is going from the dissatisfaction half to the satisfaction half. So what is the characteristic of this one-dimensional or satisfied need? So these are like more we provide, more satisfied the customer will be. So if it is, going towards the functional side where the one-dimensional needs are fully fulfilled and the satisfaction level also increases, right? And less we provide, less satisfied the customer will be. So as it is moving towards the dysfunctional side, the customer satisfaction also would get reduced, right? So the customer would feel highly dissatisfied as well. So this is kind of proportional, right? The customer satisfaction would be proportional to the quantum of one-dimensional or satisfied needs that you are able to provide, right? And the third one is the delighter need. As I told you, this is exactly opposite to the must-be need. So what is the characteristic of this delighter need? So these are the needs which are like, even if you don't provide, the customer is not going to feel dissatisfied. So even if these delighter needs are dysfunctional, we don't see the delighter curve stepping into the dissatisfaction half. It still remains in the satisfaction half, right? So it is not as if the customer would feel dissatisfied even if the delighter needs are not provided. But on the other hand, delighter needs are provided, then the customer would be highly satisfied. So as it moves towards the functional side, we see a steep curve for the delighter need entirely in the satisfaction half. So these are the type of needs which the customer is not expecting at all. So this is like a surprise element for the customer. This is like a wow factor for the customer. So just because the customer is not expecting this, so the customer obviously will not be dissatisfied if the delighter need is not provided to you. On the other hand, if the delighter need is provided, the customer would be pretty much surprised with that delighter need and will show higher levels of satisfaction. Now let us look at a very simple example and try to understand what could be the must be one-dimensional and delighted needs for this particular scenario. So imagine yourself as a customer stepping into a restaurant, right? Imagine yourself as a customer stepping into a restaurant. So with whatever characteristics that we have discussed for all these three categories of customer needs, what would be the must be needs or what would be the list of must be needs for you when you step into a restaurant as a customer? So what are all the must be needs that you would be expecting? So these are the type of needs, as I told you. If it is provided, it's not as if you're going to feel satisfied about it. But on the other hand, if it is not provided, you'll be highly dissatisfied.
Food.
So what would be the must be?
There must be some food.
Yeah, there has to be availability of food is a must be need. And the place
Place
should
to
be neat
sit.
and clean. It should be hygienic, right? It should be
Yeah.
neat and clean, proper ambience, place to sit. So these are all the basic things. Just because all these things are available in the restaurant, it's not as if you're going to feel extremely happy about it. But on the other hand, even if one of these things is missing out, you will be highly dissatisfied as a customer, right? So all these things that we discussed would be part of the must be need when you step into a restaurant as a customer. So the hygiene, the place to sit, the proper ambience, availability of the food items as per the menu card. Many times, you would order for a food item. Looking at the menu card, they will say, the waiter will say that currently that food is not available in the kitchen, right? And that could be your favorite food item as well. So you'll be highly dissatisfied as a customer. Just because that food item is available in the kitchen, it's not as if you are going to get satisfied about it, but in case the food item is not available, you'll be highly dissatisfied as a customer. So all these things would be part of your must be need. So what would be the one dimensional or satisfier need? So according to me, the quality and quantity of food, right, could be one dimensional or satisfier need. So higher the quality and quantity of food, more satisfied I will be as a customer. Lesser the quantity and quality of food, less satisfied I will be as a customer. Then finally, we have the delighter. So what will be the delighter need, which is something that we are not expecting as customers. So the delighter need could be something like this, right? So you have taken food in that restaurant and you're about to pay the bill. at the time of payment of bill, the restaurant manager comes and tells you that there is a 10% price discount on the total bill amount. So what will be your mood as a customer? You'll be highly delighted with that offer because this is something you are not expecting. This has come out from nowhere, right? So you'll be highly satisfied as a customer because you're not expecting it. This is kind of a wow factor for you, right? So 10% discount you'll enjoy. The next time you visit the same restaurant, 10% discount is given. Third time, 10% discount is given. Fourth time, 10% discount is given. Fifth time also 10% discount is given. But the sixth time, when you visit that same restaurant, they suddenly say that the 10% discount has been withdrawn. So you need to pay the full bill amount. So what will be your mood as a customer? So previous 5 occasions, you have enjoyed the 10% discount on the total bill amount. So sixth time when you go there, they suddenly say that the 10% discount is no longer available. So what will be your mood as a customer? Will you feel happy with that announcement? Definitely not. You'll be highly dissatisfied. Why? Because when the delighters are consistently provided over a period of time, it will become must be in the minds of the customer. We need to be aware of this fact. So we cannot, consistently delight the customers. So if you happen to do so, then we need to continue with that delighter because the delighter over a period of time, we need to understand would have become must be in the minds of the customer, right? So Amazon gives this offer, right, during a certain period of an year, right? So each and every year during that particular time frame, so Amazon gives you some good offers. So as a customer, I would be eagerly awaiting for that period to come, correct? So that I can make use of the discount prices, correct? So if Amazon is not going to announce that offer during that period, I'll be highly dissatisfied with Amazon, right? Because this is something I've started to expect. When it was announced first, remember, it would have been a delighter for our customers, right? So all the customers would have felt extremely delighted with that offer. But then when it has become an annual feature, so people would actually look forward to it during that part of the year, that there will be some discounted sale announced by Amazon. So if that doesn't happen, now the customers would be highly dissatisfied, right? So this is the catch here. So delight us, we need to remember when it is consistently provided over a period of time will become must be in the minds of the customer because the customer would start expecting those delighters to be provided forever, right? So this is based on the principle that luxuries of yesteryears have become necessities in today's life, right? When TV was first introduced, it used to be a big luxury for all of us, right? So in fact, I was there, when tea got introduced for the first time. So it was a big luxury. Very few people used to own TV in those days, right? I'm talking about 50 years back. But then now if you see, you can't find a house without a television set. It's become a necessity in today's context, right? So this is based on this particular concept that delighters, when consistently provided over a period of time, will become must be in the minds of the customer. So once you start delighting consistently, we need to keep delighting the customer, or that the delighter would have become must be. So we need to keep providing that provision to the customer forever, right? That is very, very important. And one more important thing to be noted here is so what is must be, what is dimensional, or what is a delighter could vary from customer to customer. So we cannot assume that the needs would be consistent across the customer group. So that is why it's important for us to understand who is our customer so that we will be able to clearly understand what would be his must be needs, one dimensional needs, and delighter needs because it can vary from customer to customer. So what is must be to me could be a delighter for someone else, right? Say, for example, there is a person who has been visiting five-star hotels for the last 10 years or so. So whatever privileges that are extended by the hotel management could well be a must be for that gentleman, right? Because he has been visiting the five-star hotels for the last 10 years. So whatever privileges that are extended by the hotel management could well be a must be need for that person. And there is another person. who is probably visiting a five-star hotel for the first time. And whatever privileges that are extended by the hotel management could well be a delighter for that individual because he has not experienced any such thing before and he didn't have any expectations stepping into that restaurant, right? So, whatever privileges that are extended by the five-star hotel management would well be a delighter for that individual, right? So, it would vary from person to person. Again, this person probably starts visiting five-star hotels quite frequently, and those privileges extended by the five-star hotel would become must be for this individual as well. So, over a period of time, we need to understand delighters, when consistently provided, will become must be in the minds of the customer, right? And let us look at a process example as well. So, let us look at a scenario where uh, accuracy percentage is the metric, and the customer has fixed the target for this accuracy percentage as 99%. And we all know that accuracy percentage is higher the better kind of metric. So if it is higher the better kind of metric, which specification limit will be applicable for this metric? So only the LSL will be applicable for this metric because on the upper side, there will not be any limit, right? So only LSL, lowest specification limit, will be applicable for this metric. So the customer, apart from providing the target measure as 99%, has also provided the minimum service level for accuracy, which is 97%. So this 97% is to be treated as the lower specification limit, right? Now, what will be the must be need here? Achieving that 97% is the must be need, because if you are going to fall below 97%, then the customer is going to levy penalty, right? So you are supposed to pay penalty to the customer. So that being the case, achieving that minimum service level of 97% accuracy will be the must be need. Just because you have achieved 97% accuracy, the customer is not going to feel satisfied because the customer is expecting you to achieve 99% accuracy. But if you fail to achieve even this 97% accuracy, the customer would feel highly dissatisfied with your service. Clear? And then the one-dimensional need or the satisfied need. So the number of times you are able to achieve the target accuracy percentage of 99% would actually result in the satisfaction levels for the customer as well. So higher the number of times you are able to achieve the target accuracy of 99%, more satisfied the customer will be. Lesser the number of times you are achieving this target accuracy of 99%, less satisfied the customer will be, right? So this could be the one-dimensional need. So what would be the delighter need here? So customer is expecting you to achieve 99% accuracy, but one of the month you have achieved 99.5% accuracy. So what will be the mood of your customer? The customer will be highly satisfied with your performance, right? The customer will be highly satisfied with your performance. So the second month, you achieve 99.8% accuracy. Third month, 99.6% accuracy. Fourth month, 99.7% accuracy. And then the fifth month, 99.55% accuracy. Sixth month, you slide down to 99.1% accuracy. So, what will be the mood of the customer? The customer will be highly dissatisfied with your performance. Even though you might have met the customer target of 99%, you have sufficiently delighted your customer by achieving 99.5% and above. So obviously now the customer would start expecting a performance greater than 99.5%. So if you slide down to 99.1%, obviously the customer would be dissatisfied because you have sufficiently delighted your customer with some superlative performances. And you need to continue providing the same because the delighters, as we all know, if it is consistently provided over a period of time, will become must be in the minds of the customer. Clear? So here's some background noises, so just keep yourself on mute. Yes, I can also do it. Yeah, thank you. Clear? And another important thing to be noted here is, without even fulfilling the must be and the one-dimensional needs, please do not even try to provide delighter needs to your customer. That will not delight the customer, right? You can take it from me. That is not going to delight the customer. So imagine this scenario, the same restaurant scenario. So you step into a restaurant. So as a customer, you didn't, find the place to be neat and hygienic, and you didn't get a place to sit immediately. And majority of the food items that are printed on the menu card is not available in the kitchen, right? So you would be terribly dissatisfied as a customer. And on top of it, if the restaurant management is going to provide a price discount on the total bill amount, will this announcement would actually delight you as a customer? Definitely not, right? So what you would think, if this price discount that is offered by the hotel management, so you'll think that this is a compensation for all the hardships that you actually underwent in that restaurant, right? You'd have already taken a decision not to come back to this restaurant anymore, right? So that being the case, whatever the delighter tactics that the restaurant management may come up with will not actually delight you as a customer, because you have found that the must be or the one dimensional needs have not been completely fulfilled. So the delighter needs will work only if the must be and the one dimensional needs are completely fulfilled. Then there is a point in providing the delighter need. So without even fulfilling the must be or the one dimensional needs, as I told you, there is no point in providing the delighter need, because that is not going to delight the customer, right? We need to understand this particular fact. So many of us or many of the service providers may think that even if you're falling short of the must be needs or the one dimension needs, if you're going to delight the customer, then the customer is going to forget about all the other things. That's not going to be the case. So the bad experiences, the customers will carry on forever. So they would have already taken a decision not to come back to that restaurant. So even if you are going to provide them with delighted needs, that would definitely not delight the customer. So we need to be aware of it. So which one you would prioritize? Obviously, the must be needs would be prioritized first if you are falling short of it. Then comes the one dimensional or satisfied needs. And finally, we need to look at providing the delighted needs. I always used to say we need to have a strong basement for us to construct a beautiful building. So delighted needs are like beautiful buildings, right? And must be and one dimensional needs are like strong basement. So only after fulfilling the must be or the one dimensional needs, you need to aim at providing the delighted needs. So without even fulfilling the must be or the one dimensional needs, that means your basement is very weak. And if you want to construct a beautiful building on top of a weak basement, the beautiful building can collapse at any given point of time, because the delighted needs cannot withstand if the must be needs and or the one dimensional needs are not fulfilled, right? So the priority would be obviously the must be needs if you're falling short of it, because that has to be attended immediately, because this is, as we stated here, it's a critical priority. And then comes the one dimensional need, and finally we can look at providing the delighted need. Once again, if you are consistently going to provide this delighted need, we need to ensure that we provide this need forever, because delighted needs, when consistently provided over a period of time, will become must be in the minds of the customer. So this is what I have summarized here. So the customer needs as per Kano model are categorized into three types. The must be needs are the ones which are like, if it is provided, the customer is not going to be satisfied, right? So if it is not provided, then the customer will be highly dissatisfied. And these must be needs will also include, as I told you, the basic functionality needs of that product or service. And then we have the one-dimensional needs. The one-dimensional needs or satisfied needs are like, more we provide, more satisfied the customer will be. Less we provide, less satisfied the customer will be. The customer satisfaction will be in direct proportion to the quantum of this one-dimensional or satisfier needs that we would provide to the customer. And the third one is the delighter. So what is the delighter need? So this is exactly opposite to the must be need. So these are like if provided or if not provided, the customer is not going to be dissatisfied. But if provided, the customer would feel highly satisfied. So these are like surprise elements or wow factors which the customer was not expecting at all. So this is like a surprise element. And delighter needs, as I told you, when consistently provided over a period of time, will become must be in the minds of the customer. So obviously, you'll prioritize fulfilling the must be needs first, and then we'll move on to the one dimensional or satisfier need. And finally, we will look at providing the delighter need to our customers, right? So we can also use the AI tool to actually come up with this categorization of customer needs for a particular scenario. So for the same restaurant scenario, let us see what are all the various must be needs or the one dimensional needs or delighted needs, which would be listed down by this AI tool called Perplexity. I told you at the first day. So this kind of an additional learning for you will also look at using this AI tool for coming up with some important decisions as part of our Six Sigma project exercise. And as part of this training curriculum, we will also see how to use this AI tool in order to arrive at solutions, right? So let me just write the prompt. So as a customer or for the scenario where the customer is visiting a restaurant, perform a Kano model exercise and list down the must be one dimensional and delighter needs. So for the scenario where customer is visiting a restaurant, perform a Kano model exercise and list down the must be one dimensional and delighter needs. So once I provide the prompt, so the AI tool has given me the list of must be needs. So most of them are pretty much what we discussed. Of course, the must be needs would include the clean and hygienic facilities, the safe and edible food free from contamination or spoilage, prompt seating, the seating available, accurate billing, right? The billing is also done without any mistakes. So one dimensional needs could be the taste of the food, right? And also the quantity, the portion. So friendly, attentive service, reasonable pricing for the food items that we consume, and efficient food delivery to the table. So these could be your one dimensional needs. And the delighter needs. So personalized touches like complimentary birthday dessert or the staff remembering repeat preferences, unique ambience enhancement like music, surprise gestures like a free appetizer sample or post-meal handwritten thank you note, proactive problem resolution with upgrades, right? So these are all some of the delighter needs that we can actually think of, right, when a customer visits a restaurant. Fine. So as I told you, this AI tool can be used as a complementary tool. So we need to definitely explore, on the ground, what would be the must be need or one dimensional need or a delighter need for a particular scenario. But then if you are totally clueless, you do not know where to start, then we can make use of this AI tool and then, you know, get the list of all these categories of needs for a particular scenario. But at the end of the day, you need to take the final call. Using your natural intelligence, you need to take the final call as to whether a particular need would be relevant for the scenario that you are dealing with. That is important. So this is how we will get to see using the AI tool. So as I told you, as part of this training, so you'll get this additional learning as well. So you'll also understand how to leverage the AI tool in a Six Sigma project exercise. Fine. So this is about the Kano model. Any doubts, any questions regarding this, or any experiences that you would want to share before we move on?
I have a question on the project charter.
Yeah.
Do
Project
you,
charter we are yet to discuss. We'll come to that later.
yeah, but do you suggest a specific template to be used?
Yeah. Those things we will discuss. The
Okay,
templates, everything I will show you when we discuss about the project exercise. So
thank you.
we have the project documentation template, which will also be provided to those participants who are interested in working on a project exercise. So project charter we ready to see, but the template part of it we will kind of take you through on the 10th day of this training program, as I told you on the very first day.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So there is a template, not only for the project charter, but for documenting the entire project. Fine. So let us move on to the next section, which is identifying the priority business problem and the related CTQ metric. So once we have done the Scano model exercise, so you would know, so what is the priority business problem that we need to attend immediately? Otherwise, the customer is going to be highly dissatisfied with us. So we need to identify that priority business problem and also need to come up with the related CTQ metric for that business problem. So as I told you, CTQ, the full form is critical to quality. So this CTQ metric would help us to quantify the business problem. So how bad or how big the business problem is something that we would be able to arrive at when we actually express this CTQ metric in numerical terms, right? So against the customer target accuracy of 99%, our current performance could only be 96%. So only when we measure the CTQ metric, which is accuracy percentage in numerical terms, we will be able to clearly understand how big the business problem is. So that is why it's important for us to come up with the CTQ metric. And another important thing is, as I told you on the very first day, Six Sigma is all about establishing each and everything with the help of data. So data analysis, data is an integral part of our Six Sigma journey. So that being the case, we need to establish how big the business problem is with the help of data, and that is what the CTQ metric will actually help us to accomplish, right? So how to prioritize the business problem? Say, for example, in case of higher number of errors you have identified in the process, then the CTQ metric could be percentage accuracy, right? So you have higher number of errors identified, then the CTQ metric that you would want to improve as part of the project exercise could be percentage accuracy. Or if you find the lateness in delivery, that is the key business problem, then the CTQ metric can be average turnaround time. So TAT is turnaround time, right? So the average turnaround time or the average time taken to deliver the output to the customer can be considered as the CTQ metric for necessary improvement. Or if you feel that you have higher number of employees working in your process, then the CTQ metric that you would want to improve will be average productivity. So by improving the average productivity, so you will be able to reduce the headcount working in your process. So depending on the business problem that you would want to prioritize, we can arrive at the related CTQ metric for that business problem, which would help us to quantify that business problem in numerical terms. In other words, we will be able to understand how big the business problem is, right? So CTQ metric will help us to quantify the business problem. So once we have the CTQ metric clearly identified for a business problem, And we have also measured the overall performance of the CTQ metric. We need to perform what is called the CTQ drill down exercise. So what is the objective of this exercise as we discussed? So CTQ drill down needs to be performed in order to identify the focus areas that we need to consider for improvement within the process. So as I told you, so you might have the accuracy percentage for the entire process. Say this is process XYZ. So the accuracy percentage for this process XYZ is 96% against the customer target of 99%. So obviously the overall performance is not looking all that great. So, but then when we perform the CTQ drill down exercise, what I need to do is I need to calculate the accuracy percentage at sub-process levels. So there could be various sub-process areas within the process which might have actually contributed to the overall performance of the entire process. So we need to identify those sub-process areas within the process which are actually pulling down the overall process performance. So that as part of the Six Sigma project exercise, I would be able to focus on these sub-process areas alone for necessary improvement. So I need not unnecessarily tamper with the performance of those sub-process areas which are already performing really well. So there is a saying, we should not tamper with a well-performing process. So if a sub-process is already performing well, then why unnecessarily we need to tamper with that sub-process? So there might be opportunities for us to make some improvement with regard to that sub-process as well, which is already performing well. But this is not the time. So my priority would be to focus on these sub-process areas which are actually pulling down the overall process performance. Then some other project, I will try to improve the already well-performing sub-process areas further, right? That can be a separate project. But as far as this project is concerned, I would focus only on those sub-process areas which are actually pulling down my overall process performance. So that is the example I have given here. So if the percentage accuracy of process XYZ is 96%, against the customer target of 99%, the CTQ drill down will be performed by calculating the accuracy percentage at sub-process levels. And the results are as follows. So these are the results, right? So we have 4 sub-processes under process XYZ. So sub-process A, the accuracy percentage is only 94%, way below the customer expectation of 99%. Sub-process B, it's only 94.2%. Sub-process C is 99.2%. Sub-process D, it is 99.1%. So if you are going to take the overall performance, it comes out to 96% for process XYZ. But then we can understand the overall performance of process XYZ is so low, mainly because of sub-processes A and B. So sub-processes C and D, as we can see, seems to be comfortably meeting the customer target of 99% accuracy. It's only because of the sub-processes A and B, we find the overall accuracy percentage for process XYZ being 96% against the target measure of 99%. So what is that I'm supposed to do? So I need to in-scope only sub-processes A and B for necessary improvement as part of the Six Sigma project. So I will not be focusing on sub-processes C and D as far as this Six Sigma project is concerned. So I will keep sub-processes C and D as out of scope. So I'm going to focus only on improving the sub-processes A and B as part of my project exercise. So as I have summarized here, as per the above, we can clearly understand that sub-processes A and B are the ones which are actually pulling down the overall process XYZ performance. And hence, we need to focus on improving the sub-processes A and B as part of our Six Sigma project. Sub-processes C and D are comfortably meeting the customer target, and hence these sub-processes need not be tampered with as of now, right? Even though these sub-processes might have opportunities to improve upon further, but this is not the time. So we need to choose the right battle, as they would say. So this is the time for us to identify those sub-process areas which are actually pulling down the overall process performance. So that has to be set right before we kind of look at improving the already performing sub-processes further, right? So sub-processes A and B will be in scope as far as this project is concerned. Sub-processes C and D will be out of scope as far as this project is concerned. Now, after performing the CTQ drill down exercise, we will prepare, or the project team will prepare, the introductory document for any Six Sigma project called Project Charter, and will present the same to the leadership for their approval. So only after leadership provides their approval to the project team will be able to proceed on this project exercise further, right? So there are various elements that are part of this project charter. We will understand all these basic elements that you would find in a project charter. So the first one is the business case, and the second one is the problem statement, and then we have goal statement, and then the scope of the project, and then the project team, the project timelines, and finally we have the probable benefits. So these are the various elements that you would find in a project charter document, right? So you'll see all these elements in detail. So the first one is the business case. So business case is a very, very important element in a project charter. So business case is where you will provide justification for working on the Six Sigma project exercise. In other words, we need to specify very clearly what will go wrong if I'm not going to work on this project now. So what are all the repercussions that we are going to face if this project is not executed as of now? So that has to be clearly spelled out as part of the business case. In fact, out of all these elements that we just now saw in the project charter, only the business case will be slightly elaborate. All the other elements needs to be short, crisp, and clear, right? So we should not be writing stories. Only the business case will be slightly elaborate. So the business case will contain couple of paragraphs. So the first paragraph, you will talk about the process. What is this process all about? How many employees are working in this process? What is the average volume inflow? So all those details will be given in the first paragraph. The second paragraph, you will talk about the business problem at a high level, and then you will provide the justification as to why you would want to address this business problem on priority, right? So when you provide justification, it's important for us to provide the impact part of the business problem in terms of dollar value. As I told you, the top management of any organization will be able to understand only one language, that is the dollar language. So if you are going to provide the impact part of it as a process metric performance, then it's quite likely that the top management or the leadership may not be able to appreciate it. Because we need to understand that the leadership may not be closely connected with your process, right? So they may not be knowing the nuances of your process. So what they would be able to clearly understand is the dollar impact of this business problem. So if you are going to quote the impact part of the business problem in terms of dollar value, so the leadership team would be able to appreciate the depth of the business problem or the magnitude of the business problem, and would be in a position to provide approval to the project team to proceed with the project exercise. Clear? So to the extent possible, try to quote the dollar impact for the business problem under business case. Say, for example, if you are facing higher number of errors, obviously I told you we will try to improve the percentage accuracy, right, as part of the project exercise. So what sort of justification you will provide for higher number of errors? So obviously you will say when the defect percentage is like 15%, right? So it would result in rework to the extent of say 10%, right? So this rework is a process metric. So if you are going to say 10% is a rework, which is the impact of so many errors identified in the process, the leadership may not be able to appreciate the 10% rework, right? But then if you are going to extend this further and say this 10% rework would result in so much dollars or so many dollars with regard to cost of poor quality, then the leadership will be able to clearly appreciate the magnitude of the business problem. So if you're going to say that 10% rework will result in cost of poor quality to the extent of $10,000 per month, so the leadership of the organization would be in a position to clearly understand what is the depth or magnitude of the business problem. So they would immediately calculate. So $10,000 per month is the cost enhancement. So this will have an impact on the profit margin. So the profit margin will get reduced by how much quantum. So all these calculations they will do. And if the situation is quite alarming, then they will immediately provide approval to the project team to proceed with the project exercise. And another, thing that you can always quote when you are facing a higher number of errors in the process would be the business opportunities, right? You can also say that because of so many errors being identified, so the customer satisfaction is very low, and this might have an impact on the future business prospects to the extent of, say, $1 million per annum, right? So when you are quoting all these things in the dollar language, the leadership would be in a position to understand the impact part of it very, very clearly and would be in a position to provide you with necessary approvals to proceed with the project exercise, right? So that is what I have written here. The impact of the business problem to the extent possible needs to be quoted in terms of dollar value. So what primarily the business case would help us to accomplish? The business case is to address the economic feasibility and justify how the project addresses the business needs of the organization. So there can be a question on this. So that is why I made this in bold font. So they would have mentioned the business case would address, and you need to pick the option economic feasibility and also justify how the project would address the business needs of the organization. So that option needs to be picked as the right option. Clear? So this business case is going to be a very, very important element in this project charter. In fact, as a kid, for getting a capital item from our parents, we would have presented a lot of business cases. If you remember, say a kid wants a bicycle. So what sort of business case will be presented to the parents? So the kid will say, if you do not get me the bicycle, I'll be late for the school, I'll be late for the tuition classes, and I will be missing out on some important lessons. And ultimately, I might even fail in the examination. Right? So this kind of a threatening stance is more than sufficient for the parents to sanction a bicycle for the kid. Right? So you might have experience, right? So how the kids would present a business case in order to get a capital item, right? So this is nothing but a business case. So similar kind of a business case needs to be prepared for, proceeding with the project exercise. So here we also need to quote the dollar impact of the business problem. So that is an important thing. Now, the next one is the problem statement. So as I told you, all the other elements that you would find in the project charter needs to be short, simple, and crisp. So the problem statement is all about quantifying the business problem, and also we would be able to understand the current quality gap. So when we come up with the problem statement, it would help us to quantify the business problem and also understand the current quality gap that is existing. So the simple template for the problem statement would be something like this. So in fact, this can be used as a format for your project exercise as well. So you don't have to write anything more than what is written here, what is quoted here. So the problem statement will be something like this. So percentage accuracy is considered as a CTQ metric for improvement. So percentage accuracy of process XYZ during the baseline period, July 2024 to June 2025. So we always need to come up with the latest 1 year period as the baseline period. It's very, very important, right? So what will happen if you don't consider the latest 1 year period as baseline period? Suppose your process performance has got plenty of fluctuations. So it's very, very risky for us to consider a 3 month period as the baseline period, because in that quarter, we do not know the process performance would have been the worst or the process performance would have been the best. And that would not be a correct representation of the overall process performance. So when you have plenty of fluctuations in the process performance, it's always better to consider the 1 year period as the baseline period. So when we consider the 1 year period, all ups and downs with regard to the process performance will get completely averaged out, and you will get to know the average performance of the process. So that is why, we would suggest that need to consider the 1 year period as the baseline period for a Six Sigma project exercise. And it is slightly risky to consider anything less than 1 year baseline period. And this should be the latest 1 year baseline period, right? So we should not be considering the 1 year period something like, couple of years back. No, that is not going to really help you out, right? So what was relevant couple of years back may not be relevant in the current day scenario. So things are quite dynamic. So the latest 1 year period needs to be considered as the baseline period. So fixing the baseline period is always going to be an important exercise. So the latest 1 year period needs to be considered as the baseline period. So when we measured accuracy percentage, considering this baseline period, July 2024 to June 2025, it was only 96% against the customer target of 99%, thereby impacting customer satisfaction. So let me provide the latest 1 year period. So this document was prepared some time back. So we have the baseline period as July 2024 to June 2025. Now that we are in January 2026, so I will have the baseline period as Jan 2025 to December 2025, right? So Jan 2025 to December 2025. So the baseline measure for the accuracy percentage was only 96% against the customer target of 99%, thereby impacting the customer satisfaction. So we are able to understand not only the baseline performance of the CTQ metric, which would be reflecting the business problem, but we will also be able to understand the quality gap. So what is the quality gap? So this is the difference between the target measure and the current measure. So target measure is 99%, current measure is only 96%. So there is a 3% quality gap which needs to be bridged as part of this project exercise. So what are the various elements that you would find in this problem statement? So the first one obviously is the CTQ metric, which is percentage accuracy. So this is the CTQ metric which we plan to improve as part of the project exercise. And the next one is the process name, which is process XYZ. And then the baseline period. As I told you, the latest 1 year period needs to be considered as the baseline period. And then the baseline measure of the CTQ metric, which is 96%. And then the customer target, which is 99%, so that we are able to understand the quality gap. And then we'll end the sentence with the high level impact that would be felt by the customer. So thereby impacting customer satisfaction, right? So this is the template for the problem statement, which can be used for your project exercise as well. The only thing is you might have to change the name of your CTQ metric. The process name has to be given. The baseline period could be different. Of course, the performance measure also could be different. Target could be different. But rest of the things, the format as such needs to be retained as it is. So we should not be writing stories under problem statement. Very, very simple, short and crisp. The next one that we are going to look at is the goal statement. So goal statement is where we are going to fix the project goal. And this will be done as per a principle called SMART principle. So the project goal needs to be fixed as per the SMART principle, meaning the project goal should be specific, it should be measurable, it should be achievable yet aggressive, it should be relevant, and it should be time bound. So the project goal needs to be fixed as per a principle called SMART principle, meaning the project goal should be specific, it should be measurable, it should be achievable yet aggressive, and it should be relevant and time bound. So I'm saying achievable yet aggressive. Why? Because if it is something that can be easily achieved, then we will not call that as a Six Sigma project. Say, for example, if your current performance is 96% accuracy, so you're fixing a target as 96.2% accuracy. Is it an aggressive target? No doubt it is an achievable target. You can even achieve this 96.2% without performing any significant improvement, right? During the due course of your process performance, you can easily achieve this 96.2%. So this is an achievable target, but is it an aggressive target? Definitely not, right? So in the textbook, A will be mentioned as achievable. Then I have added achievable yet aggressive, because when you fix the project goal in a Six Sigma project, it has to be an aggressive target because we are looking at breakthrough process improvement. We should not forget it, right? So it should be achievable yet aggressive. So when the current performance is only 96% accuracy, we can always fix the target or the goal for the project as 99% accuracy. So you might argue that the difference is only 3%. So how can it be an aggressive target? So we need to remember this 3% difference is at the higher or the upper stream of the performance levels. So as we go higher up in the performance ladder, I hope all of you would be able to understand, it's all the more difficult for you to achieve that incremental improvement in the performance, right? Suppose your current performance is only 80%. You can easily achieve 90%, correct? So the 10% gap can be easily bridged without, sweating too much, without putting in a lot of effort. But if your current performance itself is 96%, then achieving 99% is going to take in lot of effort, right? So it's not going to be very easy because we are looking at bridging this 3% gap at the upper stream of your performance levels. So it's as we go higher up in the performance ladder, achieving that incremental improvement in the performance levels is going to be all the more challenging for you. I hope you understand this theory. So if your current performance is only 80%, if you're going to fix the target as 99%, will you be able to achieve it in one single project exercise? Definitely not, because you are so far behind. So you cannot have an ambitious target like 99% when your current performance is only 80%. So what you can possibly do is come up with a phase-wise approach. So what is this phase-wise approach? So first I will try to improve from 80% to 90%, and then from 90% to 96%. And then finally from 96% to 99%. So this is how we need to proceed, in a Six Sigma project exercise. The initial project, I will only try to improve from 80% to 90%. When the performance is so low, obviously you don't have to really explore all these unknown causes. Most of the causes will be known to you, and you will be able to perform the lean improvements and improve the process performance up to 90%. Again, the second string, 90 to 96%. So you can definitely work on certain lean improvements and look at applying Six Sigma tools and techniques to improve the process performance to 96%. But beyond 96%, if you still want to improve, so that is when you would definitely start exploring those unknown causes. Because when it is like 99% accuracy, so it's going to be all the more challenging for you to achieve that number. So you would start exploring those unknown causes, right, which might be having a impact on the business problem, right? So this is a goal statement that I have compiled here. This is again a format which we can replicate when you work on the project exercise to improve percentage accuracy of process XYZ from the current 96% to 99% by the end of September 2025 is a complete goal statement, right? So in this goal statement, again, if you see, it will start with the verb. That is, what is the action? So to improve is the action here, right? And what is that we are trying to improve? The CTQ metric, percentage accuracy, right? For which process? Process XYZ. And what is the baseline measure? 96%. What is the project goal? 99%. By when this project goal will be achieved? By the end of September 2025. So this is a valid goal statement, right? So in the final assessment, you will be provided with the goal statement and you'll be asked to validate whether this goal statement is correct or not. So if you happen to find a goal statement similar to what I have given as example here, then you can pick the option that the goal statement is absolutely correct. So we should not be writing a goal statement like to improve percentage accuracy of process XYZ from 96% to 99% in 3 months' time. So when this 3 month time would start, nobody will know. Correct? So when this 3 month time will start, nobody will know. So we should not be, making a vague reference to the timeline in the goal statement. So we should be very, very specific with regard to the timeline in a goal statement. So we need to mention September 2025 or whatever it is. So here, since we have gone past September 2025, let me give the date as March 2026. By the end of March 2026, right, is the timeline by which I am expecting to achieve this project goal. So the leadership, when they actually look at this, they would be able to clearly understand that the project team would be able to achieve the project goal by the end of March 2026. So we need to be very, very specific with regard to the timeline, the goal statement. And then we have the scope of the project. So scope of the project is all about creating boundaries and resources for the project exercise, right? So there can be a question on this. Scope of the project would include. So we need to tick the option boundaries and resources. So there will be an option boundaries and resources. So you need to pick that as the right option for the scope of the project. So when I say boundaries, it's about process boundaries, right? Say you would have already done the CTQ drill down exercise. So you would have identified the in-scope process areas that needs to be improved. You have also identified the out-of-scope process areas which needs to be kept aside as far as the Six Sigma project is concerned. So it will help you to come up with the in-scope and out-of-scope elements. So in-scope, as far as our example is concerned, we will mention sub-processes A and B. Out-of-scope will be sub-processes C and D. So in-scope will be sub-processes A and B, and out-of-scope will be sub-processes C and D in our example, right? Similarly, if you would want to consider the performance of the associates who are more than 6 months old in the system for the project exercise, you need to specify accordingly under project scope. So in scope will be apart from sub-processes A and B, you will also include the performance of the associates or the employees who are more than 6 months old in the process. And out of scope will be sub-processes C and D, and also the performance of the employees who are less than 6 months old in the process. So that is going to be kept out of scope. So like this, we need to clearly mention what is in scope and what is out of scope. But then out of scope, there will be a tendency for people to write all the other sub-processes. So they will write the sub-process names for under in scope. But when it comes to out of scope, so they might have, some good number of sub-processes being kept out of scope. So they will merely mention all other sub-processes. But people need to be aware that the leadership will not be closely connected with your process, as I told you at the beginning. So obviously, we need to mention the names of these sub-processes that you are planning to keep out of scope as far as the project is concerned, right? So that's very, very important. So without, feeling lazy, so we need to mention the names of all the sub-process areas which are going to be kept out of scope as far as the project is concerned. And then we have project team. So as I told you, project scope is created in order to prevent scope creep. So scope creep is nothing but inadvertently, venturing into some irrelevant process areas. So as far as this Six Sigma project is concerned, so as per our example, I need to focus only on sub-processes A and B. So I should not be venturing into sub-processes C and D. So when I create a boundary by defining the scope for the project exercise, so it would help me to prevent this scope creep. So scope creep is nothing but venturing into some irrelevant process areas as far as this project is concerned. Then comes the project team. So project team, we all know we will have the project lead along with the team members, their roles and responsibilities. And then the project champion would be part of the leadership team, along with the project mentor, who would be providing guidance support to the project team for them to successfully close the Six Sigma project exercise, right? So the project team members, so we need to have a team consisting of 3 to 4 members. That's more than sufficient. So it's not as if you need to provide opportunities to each and every person in the process team to work on a Six Sigma project. So you cannot have some, 8 to 9 project team members. So that will not really help you to, work on the project exercise in a uh, kind of a calm manner, right? So there will be a lot of turbulence if you have huge project team with you. So each one of them will be pulling the project in different directions, right? They'll be giving their own opinions and they will insist that their opinion needs to be heard first. So all these kinds of infightings will happen if you have a larger team in place. So instead, if you have a smaller team, so that would definitely help you to drive the project much more efficiently and effectively. So having 3 to 4 project team members along with the project lead is more than sufficient for you to execute a Six Sigma project exercise. As I told you, project mentor, right, is the person who would be guiding the project team towards successful closure of the Six Sigma project exercise. So project mentor can be a master black belt for a black belt project and can be a black belt for a green belt project. So even for a black belt project, the project mentor can be either a master black belt or an experienced black belt. And then comes the project timelines. So we have 5 phases in the DMAIC approach: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So we need to specify the start and the end dates for each of these 5 phases in the DMAIC approach. So we need to specify the start and the end dates for each of these 5 phases in the DMAIC approach as part of the project timelines, right? So that the total duration of the project is well within the agreed timeline. As I told you on the first day, so the duration given for a greenbelt project is 4 months, maximum 4 months. So within that, we need to show the result. For a black belt project where the scope is going to be somewhat wider, so you'll be given 6 months time to accomplish, right? So when we specify the project timelines for each and every phase in the DMAIC approach, we need to ensure that it doesn't exceed the agreed timeline given for the project exercise. And one more important thing to be noted here is you would have already seen this. So when we execute a Six Sigma project, we need to understand that the define and measure phase will go hand in hand, will go in parallel, right? So unless and until you measure the performance of the CTQ metric during this baseline period, we will not be able to even come up with this problem statement or the goal statement. So how did I get 96%? Only by measuring the accuracy percentage for this baseline period, Jan 2025 to December 2025. So that being the case, without even measuring, we will not be able to formulate this problem statement or the goal statement. So the define and measure phase in a practical scenario, when we work on the project exercise, will actually go hand in hand, followed by the analyze phase, improve phase, and control phase. But the define and measure phase will go hand in hand. This is something that we need to clearly understand, right? So there has to be a toll gate review, which needs to happen at the end of each and every phase in the DMIC approach. So the leadership will have to be part of this toll gate review. So they are supposed to review the progress of the Six Sigma project exercise, and they need to provide their suggestions to the project team. So only after the leadership provides their approval to the project team to proceed to the next phase, the project team will not be able to venture into the subsequent phase in the DMAC approach. So we are going to have a meeting with the leadership at the time of presentation of this project charter document. Then at the end of the measure phase, we are supposed to have the toll gate review with the leadership again. And then end of the analyze phase, toll gate review. End of the improve phase, toll gate review. And the final presentation will be done after the control phase gets over. So this is going to be the sequence of the review meetings that we will have with the leadership team. So the toll gate reviews are very, very, very important. So even if the leadership is not all that interested to attend these review meetings, it is the duty of the project team to approach the leadership and convince them to attend all these toll gate review meetings so that their active participation is there till the end of the project exercise. So many times I have seen the leadership will be highly motivated at the beginning of the project exercise. So they will say that, you know, they will give full support to the project team for the successful closure of a Six Sigma project. But over a period of time, the leadership also will become totally impatient and they will start expecting the results immediately. But they need to understand in a Six Sigma project, we need to run the complete course. So if it is like a 3-month project or a 4-month project, so the leadership will have to patiently wait till the end of the 4th month to get to see the expected results, right? So the patience is not there. Over a period of time, it's quite possible the leadership may lose interest in that project exercise and may not attend all these toll gate review meetings regularly. So that shouldn't be the case. If the leadership is going to lose interest in a Six Sigma project exercise, the other stakeholders also will stop supporting the project team, which should not happen at all. And if they, stop supporting the project team, then the Six Sigma project will get closed prematurely without seeing the daylight or without successfully getting closed. So which should not happen, right? So we need to ensure that the sustained leadership support is there till the end of the project exercise. And one of the platform where the leadership can demonstrate their interest in that Six Sigma project is by participating in these tollgate review meetings. So very, very, very important. So the leadership will provide their approval in these tollgate review meetings for the project team to proceed to the next phase in the DMIC approach. And finally, we have probable benefits. So here I've quoted only probable benefits, so approximate benefits, right? So the actual benefits we can calculate only after the project is closed successfully. So the probable benefits will be of two types. So one is called the hard benefits, which can be easily quantified and expressed in dollar terms. And the other one is called the soft benefits, which cannot be easily quantified. Say, for example, the employee morale, the customer satisfaction, etc. So these are all the soft benefits that we are likely to get when we successfully close a project exercise, right? So when we are addressing the customer concerns through this project exercise, the customer is bound to get satisfied. The customer satisfaction levels will definitely go up. And similarly, the employee morale is also likely to go up because the employee will feel extremely happy that they are able to come up with some higher levels of performance. But we cannot adequately quantify all these matrices. So that is why these would be listed under soft benefits. So the hard benefits will be those which we can easily quantify. In fact, we can take a clue from the business case. The business case we would have actually stated all the negatives, right? So when we successfully close the project exercise, those negatives are likely to become positives, correct? So in the business case, you would have quoted all the negatives. So you would have quoted that there will be cost of poor quality to the extent of, say, $10,000 per month. So as part of hard benefit, you can say that there will be a cost saving to the extent of $10,000 per month. And in that business case, you would have stated there could be a potential revenue loss due to loss of business opportunities to the extent of $1 million per annum. So as part of hard benefits, you can quote that there is likely to be a business gain to the extent of, or revenue gain to the extent of $1 million per annum. So whatever negatives you would have quoted as part of the business case can be converted and expressed as positives as part of hard benefits. And then we'll also come up with what is called the cost benefit analysis. Again, we will come up with an approximate cost benefit analysis. So we will come up with the project cost, the project benefits, and thereby the project gain will also get calculated. So this is something that we asked in the final assessment. So they will ask a question like, the cost benefit analysis would include the options will be given as project cost, project benefit, project gain, and then the fourth option will be all of the above. So you need to pick the fourth option, all of the above, because all these elements like project cost, project benefits, and project gain will be part of a cost benefit analysis, right? So these are the various aspects that we need to fill in. As a project team, we are supposed to fill in and present to our leadership team for them to provide approval to proceed with the project exercise. So very, very important, right? So what are the various elements that you would find in a project charter? Quickly, the business case, which is all about providing justification for working on a Six Sigma project. In other words, we need to state very clearly what will go wrong if I'm not going to work on the project now, right? And to the extent possible, we need to quote the impact part of the business problem in terms of some dollar value. Then we have the problem statement, which is all about quantifying the current problem and also understanding the quality gap. And as I told you, the problem statement will be a simple one-liner. And then the goal statement. So we need to fix the project goal as per a principle called SMART principle. And we need to be specific with regard to the timeline. So we need to mention the month and the year as the timeline part of the goal statement. Scope of the project is all about creating the boundaries and resources for the project exercise. So this would help us to avoid the scope creep. And the project team would consist of the project lead, the project team members, along with the roles and responsibilities, the project champion, and the project mentor. And the project timelines, we need to specify the start and end dates for all the 5 phases in the DMAIC approach so that the entire project can be completed within the agreed timeline. And as we understood, the define and measure phase will go hand in hand when we work on a project exercise, followed by analyze, improve, and control phase in that sequence, right? But then, as part of our curriculum, we are learning all these things in a sequence. And then the most important thing, we need to have the toll gate reviews conducted with the leadership team at the end of each and every phase in the DMIC approach. Then the probable benefits, we will have the hard and soft benefits. Hard benefits are something that we can easily quantify. The soft benefits are something which cannot be easily quantified. So the project team will also work on the cost benefit analysis, which would include the project cost, the project benefit, and the project gain. So we'll go for a 15-minute break now. So when we come back, we'll look at the other elements which are part of the define phase. Hello, friends. I'm back. Hope you're all back as well.
Yes, I'm back.
Let us continue. Fine. So once we present the project charter to the leadership and obtain their approval to proceed with the project exercise, then the project team can actually start working on the other deliverables that are part of the defined phase. So couple of important pointers that the project team need to remember when they execute the Six Sigma project. So that is given in this particular paragraph. So there can be multiple questions on this section in the final assessment. So that is why I'm making this in bold font. So the first thing obviously is the leadership support is very much required for the success or the successful closure of a Six Sigma project exercise. So we discussed about this, how it is very, very important because if the leadership support is there for the project team till the end of the project exercise, the other stakeholders also will be forced to support the project team. Whether they like it or not is a different matter. But when the leadership support is there, the other stakeholders, like the process leads and others, would be forced to support the project team till the completion of the Six Sigma project exercise. Right? So the other stakeholder support also is equally important. But then, as I told you, the leadership support is there. Other stakeholders also would automatically support the project team. So there can be a question on this in the final assessment. Whose support is very much critical for the successful closure of a Six Sigma project? We need to pick the option leadership, right? And all the activities pertaining to a Six Sigma project exercise will be compiled in a format called RACI format. So whatever activity or whatever the list of activities that we would execute as part of the Six Sigma project, so the entire list needs to be compiled in the format called RACI format. That means for each and every activity, we will come up with the people responsible for executing that activity on the ground, the person who is accountable for that activity, the people again who needs to be consulted for performing that activity, and the stakeholders who needs to be informed about the status of that activity. So for each and every activity, we will have the people responsible for carrying out that activity, the person who is accountable for that activity, the people who needs to be consulted for performing that activity, and finally, the list of stakeholders who are supposed to be informed about the status of that activity, right? So this is what we would compile in a RACI format. While there can be multiple people who would be responsible for performing that activity on the ground, there can be only one approver. Again, there will be a question on this, right? So while there can be multiple people who could be responsible for carrying out that activity, but there has to be only one accountable person. So if you have multiple accountable persons for a particular activity, what might happen? Because you can question if the activity is not getting completed on time. So we can question the approver or the accountable person. So if you have multiple people who are held accountable for a particular activity, and if there is a question with regard to that particular activity not being completed on time, so if you are going to ask the question to the first approver, he will put the blame on the second approver. And if you are going to ask the second approver, he will put the blame on the first approver. So the blame game will happen, right? So instead, if you have only one accountable person for a particular activity, then that person is the one who needs to be answered in case the activity doesn't get closed within the agreed timeline, right? So while there can be multiple employees responsible for performing an activity, as I told you, there can be only one approver for each and every activity. That means there can be only one accountable person for each and every activity. And also during the Six Sigma project, you know, uh, there can be various quarters, which might actually place requests to the project team to include their suggestions, right? So we might actually, come up with a lot of requests placed by these, multiple teams when the project team executes the Six Sigma project. And it's important that the project team doesn't entertain any ad hoc requests during the course of a Six Sigma project exercise. So as I told you, there could be multiple stakeholders who would be placing all these requests during the course of the Six Sigma project. So the project team should be careful enough not to entertain any of these ad hoc requests. So in case there is any addition, deletion or modification to the existing list of activities, these should be carried out only with the prior approval provided by the leadership team. So any addition, deletion or modification to the existing list of activities can be performed only with prior approvals provided by the leadership team. And the most important thing is all these changes to the Six Sigma project document or the list of activities needs to be communicated to the relevant stakeholders using the communication plan as detailed in the change management protocol document. So in each and every organization, there will be a document called change management document. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about this. So each and every organization will have this document called change management document. So in that document, they would have mentioned how all the changes that are made in the organization needs to be communicated to the relevant stakeholders. So first and foremost, for a particular change, who all should be the relevant stakeholders and how that change needs to be communicated to these relevant stakeholders will be clearly written in that change management protocol document. Say, for example, there is a change in the CEO of that organization. Then obviously it has to be communicated to all the stakeholders, to all the employees, right, in that organization. So all the employees will be the stakeholders who needs to be communicated with regard to that change in CEO. So how this change needs to be communicated, whether it is to be communicated through a email communication or we are going to have a town hall meeting where this change will be announced, or it is going to be uh, through both email communication as well as through town hall meeting. So how this change will be communicated to the leadership team is something that will be clearly mentioned as part of the change management protocol document. Similarly, all those changes with regard to the Six Sigma project, how it needs to be communicated and who are all would be the stakeholders who needs to be communicated about these changes will be clearly mentioned in this change management protocol document, and we need to adhere to the communication plan as detailed in this change management protocol document while announcing all these changes in the Six Sigma project exercise, right? So these are some of the important pointers that we need to remember as a project team while executing the Six Sigma project exercise. Now, as a first step after obtaining the approval from the leadership team to proceed with the project exercise, as I told you, the project team will work on creating a macro level or a high level process flow called SIPOC. So SIPOC is nothing but linking the supplier with the input, with the process, with the output, and finally with the customer. So supplier with input, with process, with output and customer. So when we create the SIPOC diagram, so we will always start with the process first, right? So you'll not go in the sequence. So you'll not first list down the suppliers and then the input and then the process. So first we will depict the process and then we will map the input that would be or the list of inputs that will be fed into the process and what will be the output that we can get from that process. And once we have listed down all the inputs, we can also identify the suppliers who would be supplying me with all these inputs. And on the other side, I will also be able to identify the customer who would be consuming my output. So this is how I will create the SIPOC diagram. So there can be multiple questions with regard to this particular pointer, which is the process will be depicted first when we create the SIPOC. So they would have asked you, so which aspect will be depicted first when we create the SIPOC diagram? So you need to pick the option process, right? So that is the correct answer. So we will not go in the sequence like supplier, input, process, output, and customer. So SIPOC, as we can see, is primarily a scoping tool. So when we look at the SIPOC diagram, so people can easily understand. So what is the process area that has been considered for improvement in this project exercise? So in this example that we saw, so when we perform the CTQ drill down, we could identify that sub-processes A and B are the ones which we need to focus for necessary improvement. So here, the depiction of process in the SIPOC diagram, we will have the sub-processes A and B depicted here, not C and D, so that anyone looking at the SIPOC diagram will clearly understand what is the start and the end point of the process which has been considered for necessary improvement as part of the project exercise, right? So SIPOC is primarily a scoping tool, and process will be the first depiction that we will make when we create this SIPOC diagram. But another advantage that we can actually get when we construct the SIPOC diagram is that we would be able to clearly validate whether the input quality is the primary reason for the bad output quality or not, right? So here in the SIPOC diagram, as I told you, we would have also listed down all the inputs. So if it is a coffee preparation example, so we would have listed down the process, the high level process in just 4 or 5 steps, right? So we would have also listed down the various inputs that will be fed into the process. So like milk, sugar, coffee powder, etc. And we would have also identified the suppliers who would be supplying me with all these inputs. So if the output quality is not all that great, as we discussed on the very first day, it could be due to the process inefficiency or due to the input quality. But then if the input quality is the primary reason for the bad output quality, then what we can do, we can look at which input is actually creating the problem. So if milk has gone stale, has become spoiled, due to which the taste of the coffee is not good, I can always identify the supplier who has supplied me with that milk. So what I can do instead of working on a project exercise, I can either warn that supplier or even change that supplier. That would solve the problem for me, right? Because we need to remember Lean and Six Sigma are process improvement methodologies. So it has got nothing with the inputs, right? So if the output quality is bad, primarily due to the input quality, then what we need to do, we need to identify the supplier who has provided me with that faulty input or the bad quality input, and we need to either warn that supplier or change that supplier. So that is the corrective action that I will take instead of working on a project exercise, because Lean and Six Sigma is all about performing process improvements, right? So we are trying to improve the process efficiency. So only if the output quality is primarily bad due to the process inefficiencies, then we will look at embarking on Lean Six Sigma journey to improve the process efficiencies, thereby improving the quality of the output. But if the output quality is bad due to input quality, then we don't have to really work on the project exercise. We'll only look at the supplier who has supplied me with that bad quality input. We need to either warn that supplier or even change that supplier in order to correct the problem, right? So this is another advantage that we can get when we create the SIPOC diagram. So very, very important. And the final step in the define phase, we will also create a micro level as-is process flow. So this micro level as-is process flow, as I told you, is created in order to identify the lean opportunities existing for me in the process, right? So we had also discussed about what exactly is as-is. So as-is is nothing but the depiction of the process as it is being executed in the shop floor. So depiction of the process as it is being executed in the shop floor is what we would call as the as-is process flow. In fact, there are three types of process flows which we need to understand as a black belt. So the first one is the ideal process flow. So ideal process flow is the one which will be available in the process document. So we all need to kind of follow that ideal process flow and execute the process. So that is the expectation. But as I told you, over a period of time, we will end up tweaking that process inadvertently or by mistake, and we will add few more process steps to the existing process flow, and that will be called as the as-is process flow. So as-is process flow is the depiction of the process as it is being executed in the shop floor. So this will be considered for necessary improvements. And once the improvements are done, we will come up with what is called the 2B process flow. So the 2B process flow is something we would create as part of the improve phase. So once the improvements are done and we also validated the improvement, we will create what is called as 2B process flow. So 2B process flow is the depiction of the process that needs to be followed by the employees in the future. So that is why it is called as 2B process flow. So we need to know what is ideal process flow, as-is process flow, and 2B process flow. So these are the three types of process flows that we have. So for performing the improvements, we need to consider the as-is process flow as the process is being executed on the shop floor. And for identifying the lean opportunities, we will be considering the micro level as-is process flow. So when I say micro level as-is process flow, it will be the depiction of the process at a keystroke level. So each and every keystroke needs to be captured as part of the process flow. So we can also come up with the VSM, as is VSM, in order to identify the lean opportunities existing for me in the process, right? So when we have multiple teams, working in that particular process, we can also think about coming up with the swim lane process diagram. So swim lane process diagram will have segregation of the multiple teams. So there is an onshore team which is working on part of the process, and there is an offshore team which is working on the other part of the process. Say the first process or the first activity is executed by the onshore team, and the second and third activities are performed by the offshore team. Then 4, 5, 6 are performed by the onshore team, and then offshore team also performs some three activities. Like this, it will crisscross and then keep happening. So when we identify a bottleneck area in the process, so when we actually look out for lean opportunities, so we can clearly understand which particular team is executing that activity. Suppose I have identified a bottleneck area, right, in this particular activity, or the bottleneck or stoppage in this activity. So I can clearly understand that this activity is being executed by the onshore team. And I can also always find out the root cause as to why there is a stoppage with regard to that particular activity performed by the onshore team, right? So, so when we have the swim lane process flow, so we can also identify the concerned team which has actually contributed to that bottleneck area, right? That becomes very, very easy in a swim lane process flow. So the main thing is we'll be depicting the process at a micro level. So each and every keystroke, right, concerned with that particular process will be captured as part of the micro level as is process flow. So process flow or flow chart is the tool that would help us in identifying the stoppages in a process. So there can be a question on this. So which tool will be used for identifying the stoppages in a process? So we need to pick the option flow chart. So process flow wouldn't be given. So they would have given it as flow chart. So flow chart or process flow both mean one and the same. So process flow or flow chart is the tool which would help us in identifying the stoppages or the bottleneck areas in a process. And once we identify it, that would actually pave way for the lean opportunities existing in the process, right? So creation of this micro level as process flow would help us to identify the lean opportunities existing in the process. And if you have multiple teams working on that process, it's always better to create a swim lane kind of a process diagram like this. And one more important thing to be noted is during the define phase, we will use a tool called affinity diagram quite extensively. So what is this affinity diagram? As the name itself suggests, it's all about grouping of the elements with similar characteristics under a particular category. That's all right? So this is a simple affinity diagram that is displayed here. So we have compiled the problems with the way the team conducts all these meetings. So the categories, have been identified as timing, focus, and attendees. So all the problems with regard to the timing, they are listed here, right? And all the problems with regard to the focus are listed here. The problems with regard to the attendees are listed here. So this is how we will create the affinity diagram and then come up with the grouping of the elements with similar characteristics under a specific category. So in define phase, if you see, so we have, several categories to be created, right? So starting with the types of customers. So we will have internal customer group and external customer group, right? And also the customer requirements, gathering of customer requirements. So we will have multiple sources through which we will be able to gather the customer requirements. Again, we will have different categories of the sources to gather the customer requirements. And again, prioritizing the customer requirements using Kano model. Again, the customer needs will be segregated into three types: the must-be needs, the one-dimensional or satisfier needs, and then the delighter needs. So since there will be multiple categorization that will be carried out as part of the define phase, it is generally believed that affinity diagram as a tool will be used extensively as part of the define phase. So it's not as if this tool will not be used in some other phase as well, but then in define phase, it's told that we will be using this tool quite extensively because there are quite a few categorizations that we will perform as part of the define phase. So since there will be a question asked with regard to this, I'm in fact providing you with this information so that you can also understand how this affinity diagram will actually look like. So the question will be, which tool will be used quite extensively as part of the define phase? So we need to pick the option affinity diagram. So these are the things that we will deliver as part of the define phase. So let us do a quick revision before we venture into the second phase in the DMAIC approach, which is the measure phase. So define phase, we will start by understanding our customer. So the definition of customer. So customer is someone who has given business to us, which is quite obvious, and slash or someone who can also get impacted by the output delivered by us. So the customer who has given business to us can also get impacted by the output delivered by us. So that is why I put and slash or it could be one of these two, right? So even if someone is getting impacted by the output delivered, then that entity needs to be considered as our customer. So two types of customers. So one is the external customer group and the other one is the internal customer group. So as part of the external customer group, we will have the customers who have actually given the business to us, the government bodies, and also the external shareholders who are the actual owners of the organization. The internal customer group will consist of people who are internal to our organization, like our immediate supervisor or manager, the leadership team, most importantly, your immediate downstream processor. So the key here is the internal customers are to be treated on par with the external customers. And once we have understood our group of stakeholders or customers, we also need to understand their requirements. So the customer requirements can be gathered through various sources. So the most commonly used source are contracts or agreements, and then the review meetings that we will conduct with the customers on a periodical basis, and the CSAT surveys, the customer satisfaction surveys. So the process of obtaining the customer feedback is what we would call as the voice of the customer. So in short, it is referred as VOC. So the voice of the customer would include the historical data analysis, the market research, and mystery shopping. So historical data analysis, market research, and mystery shopping. And once we have gathered the customer requirements, we need to prioritize the customer requirements by using a model called Kano model, invented by the Japanese quality expert by name Noriaki Kano. So Kano model will consist of three categories of customer needs. The first one is the must be need. So must be needs are those which are like, if provided, the customer is not going to feel satisfied, but if not provided, the customer would be highly dissatisfied. And we can always understand that the must be needs are the critical priority needs, and the basic functionality of a product or a service will definitely get included in these must be needs list. And then the one dimensional need or the satisfied needs are those which are like, more we provide, more satisfied the customer will be, less we provide, less satisfied the customer will be. And then finally, we have the delighted needs, which are exactly opposite to the must be needs. So delighted needs are those which are like, if you do not provide, the customer is not going to feel dissatisfied. But if you do provide, the customers will be highly satisfied. But the catch here is the delighted needs, when they are consistently provided over a period of time, will become must be in the minds of the customer. That means the customer will start expecting those needs to be provided to them in the future as well. And which one you would prioritize? Obviously, the must be needs are to be prioritized if you are falling short of it, followed by the one dimensional or the satisfied needs. And then finally, we will look at fulfilling the delighted needs. One more thing that we clearly understood was all these three categories of customer needs will not be the same for each and every customer. So it may vary from customer to customer. So what is must be to me could be a delighter for someone else. So that is why it's important for us to understand the customer. Another important thing that we understood here was that without fulfilling the must be and the one dimensional or the satisfied needs, there is no point in providing the delighted needs, because that will not delight the customer. So we need to ensure that we fulfill the must be and the one dimensional needs before even thinking of providing the delighter. And once we prioritize the customer needs, and if you find that the priority customer need, we are falling short of it, and that will be identified as the priority business problem. And for that business problem, we need to identify a metric called CTQ metric. So CTQ, the full form is critical to quality. So this CTQ metric will help us to quantify the business problem and would help us to understand how big the business problem is. So in case we face with higher number of errors as the business problem, then the CTQ metric that we can consider for improvement will be percentage accuracy. Or if you find lateness in delivery of the output to the customer being the key business problem, then the CTQ that we can plan to improve will be average turnaround time. And then once we identify the CTQ metric, the next step would be to perform the CTQ drill down exercise. So CTQ drill down is primarily done in order to identify the focus areas within the process that needs to be considered for improvement. So when we have the overall process performance provided to us, And if you notice that the overall process performance is way below the customer expectation, then we need to understand it's not all the process areas which would be contributing to the low performance of the overall process. So there could be a couple of process areas which might be pulling down the overall process performance. So as part of the CTQ drill down exercise, it's important for us to identify those process areas which are actually pulling down the overall process performance so that we can focus on improving those process areas alone as part of the Six Sigma project exercise. So the rest of the process areas will be kept out of scope as far as the project is concerned. So once the CTQ drill down exercise is completed, so the project team will work on preparing an introductory document for any Six Sigma project called Project Charter, and they will present the same to the leadership team in order to obtain their approval for the project team to proceed with the project exercise. So the basic elements that you would find in a project charter are business case, which is all about providing justification for working on a Six Sigma project exercise. So in other words, we need to specify very clearly what will go wrong if I'm not going to work on the project now. So the impact of the business problem needs to be stated to the extent possible in terms of a dollar value. So this is very, very important so that the leadership will be in a position to clearly appreciate the magnitude of the business problem. So business
Uh,
case is to
Sridhar,
uh,
could you just share or maybe show a sample charter?
no, that I will show you
Oh,
when
okay.
I take you through the project exercise on the 10th day. Right?
Oh,
On the
okay.
10th day, I will also show you a sample project. In fact, that document will be sent to you. So if you
Oh,
are
okay.
going to show interest in working on a
Uh,
Six Sigma project, so you need to fill
mhm.
in a project initiation form and send it to me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I will be sharing the sample project document along with the documentation template.
Okay, okay.
So
Uh,
project exercise, anyway, we will have a discussion on the 10th day. So I will show you the project charter, how it can be prepared, and it will be sent to you. So you can also, leisurely look at it and get an idea as to how
okay,
to frame all these elements in the project chart.
okay. One more question. If you just step back a little, where we were identifying the customer and the requirement.
Mm,
So there are three things: historical and
mm,
market search and mystery
mm,
shopping.
mm.
Could you give a live example of of these three parameters?
No, as I told you, right, historical data analysis, even in your own process. So what is the performance measure that you uh, actually measure for your metric? So what is the performance metric which you measure in your process?
It could be CSAT and sometimes the dollar
No,
value.
CSAT, you just leave it. CSAT is a feedback that we get from the customer. I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about your process metric. Could be accuracy percentage or
Yeah,
something to
yeah.
do with the
So
timeline, right?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So there will be a
Hmm.
target provided either by the internal customer or by the external customer.
Yes.
Correct. So without
So there
target, we'll
are.
not be
Mhm.
measuring that performance metric. So all these performance metrics will be measured against a target. So when we actually measure the performance metric for a baseline period, we will get to know whether we are comfortably meeting the customer target or not. So when we
Mhm.
are not meeting the customer target, we can understand that the customer might be feeling dissatisfied with our performance. So customer
Exactly.
need not explicitly mention to us, right?
Mhm.
So when we, analyze the historical data, so we can understand our performance is way below the customer expectation, and the
Mhm.
customer will not be definitely happy with our performance, right? So that will
Right.
be an indirect way of collating the customer feedback. The customer
Mm.
explicitly is not mentioning anything here, but we ourselves can understand when we are falling short of the customer target. right? So that is historical data analysis.
Yeah.
Market research is a very common phenomenon. So once you float your, product, this is more, applicable for the product and the service industry where, you are floating a product or a service on a piecemeal basis. So it is not as if you are serving a particular customer only, right? So here you are serving a group of customers. Say you are
Yeah.
floating a product in the market and the customers have bought that product, and you want to understand whether the customer like that product or not, whether they have any kind of negative feedback regarding that product. So what you will do, we will conduct a market research. So we might engage few consultants to go and talk to the customers and try to find out as to what they feel about the product or the service that has been delivered by a particular organization, right?
Oh, okay.
And mystery shopping is a new phenomenon. So this was actually new to me as well, right? So mystery shopping is where the management of a particular organization will engage a consultant to act like a customer. So the consultant will kind of visit the various sales outlets and then gather information with regard to whether the salespeople are providing the right information about the product or service. It starts from there, right? So when the salespeople do not provide the right information about the product or service that they are delivering to the customers, obviously, the customers will not be motivated to buy that product or service. So if the salespeople are not providing some critical information about the product or service, then that will not really help the organization to sell that product or service. So this consultant can always gather by interacting with the various sales personnel as to whether they are passing on the right information to the customers or not. That is number one. And number two, as I told you, as part of the market research, they can also engage with their fellow customers and try to find out what they feel about the product or service they have bought from that organization. So if someone has a very negative feedback about that product, they will not hesitate to pass it on to a fellow customer. So if you're going and interviewing them as an organization representative, some people may not want to impress you. So they might talk only the good aspects about the product or service. But then if you're going and asking as a fellow customer, obviously the person would be candid in providing the right feedback. So we will also get to know what the customers actually feel about the product or service, and the consultant will then compile a report and provide to the top management for them to take necessary corrective action. So that is what we do in mystery shopping.
Yeah, I can now correlate
Yeah,
the market's research and mystery shopping.
exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, fine. So another question that will be part of the final assessment with regard to the business case, they would actually provide you with a sample business case and they will ask you to identify if the sample business case is correct or not. So one thing that we need to clearly understand, when we actually work on the define and measure phase deliverables as part of our Six Sigma project, we should not be talking about the causes or solution, right, for the business problem. So during the define and measure phase, we will be fully focusing only on the business problem and its current performance. That's it. So we will not be deliberating on the causes and the solution pertaining to the business problem. So we have separate phases for identifying the causes and also for identifying the solutions. As I told you, the analyze phase is the phase where we would identify the causes and the root causes. And the improve phase is where we will identify the solutions for the prioritized causes. So that being the case, we should not be talking about causes or solutions during the define and measure phase in the DMAIC approach. And specifically in the business case, you'll be tempted to, make some assumptions about the causes and solution, which needs to be completely avoided. So in that question, they would have provided a sample business case, including the solution apart from the problem. So they would have mentioned the problem, but then they would have also mentioned that this problem can be rectified by streamlining the process. So streamlining the process is like providing a solution, right? And they would have asked you, what is the problem with this business statement or the business case? So we need to mention that both the problem and the solution have been provided in the business case. So that is the issue with that business case. Clear? So there can be a question on this as well. Now, moving on to the next element, which is the problem statement. And as I told you, problem statement is all about quantifying the business problem and also understanding the quality gap that is currently existing. So the problem statement is a simple one-liner. So we should not write stories under problem statement. So it will consist of the CTQ metric name and then the process name, the baseline period, which should be typically the latest 1 year period, and then the current performance of the process, right, which is the baseline measure of the CTQ metric. And this will be compared with the customer target. And then we will also end the sentence with the high level impact that would be felt by the customer. And then we will frame the goal statement, and the project goal needs to be identified or needs to be fixed as per a principle called SMART principle. That is, the project goal should be specific, it should be measurable, it should be achievable yet aggressive, it should be relevant, it should be time bound. So it should not be something that can be easily achieved. At the same time, it should not be over aggressive that you are not able to complete or you are not able to close your project exercise. So it should be achievable at an aggressive target. So the proper goal statement would be something like this: to improve percentage accuracy of process XYZ from 96% to 99% by the end of March 2026. So there will be a question on this as well. So they would have given a sample goal statement and they will ask you to validate whether this goal statement is correct or not. So if you find the goal statement on similar lines that I have given as example here, then you can safely tick the option that the goal statement is correct, right? So we should have the specific timeline mentioned as part of the goal statement. So we should not be mentioning like 4 months or 6 months as the timeline. So we should be very, very specific with regard to the month and the year as part of the goal statement. And then the scope of the project is all about creating boundaries and resources whom we are going to consider for the project exercise. So we will specify the in-scope and out-of-scope elements. So we would have performed the CTQ drill down exercise and we would have already identified the in-scope and out-of-scope elements. So those process areas can very well be incorporated here. So the project scope is basically created in order to prevent the scope creep. And then we have the project team, which will consist of the project lead along with the project team members, the roles and responsibilities, the project champion and the project mentor who would be successfully guiding the project team towards successful closure of the Six Sigma project. And then we have the project timelines. So we need to specify the start and the end dates for each of the 5 phases in the DMIC approach so that the entire duration doesn't exceed the agreed timeline, right? And one more important thing that we noticed here was that when we execute a Six Sigma project, the define and measure phase will be carried out in parallel. And then we are supposed to have a toll gate review conducted with the leadership at the end of each and every phase in the DMIC approach. So this toll gate review participation by the leadership would send out the right signals to the other stakeholders that the leadership is very much interested in this project exercise. And the other stakeholders also will keep or will continue supporting the project team. And then the probable benefits. So it will be segregated into 2 types. The hard benefits are those which can be easily quantified, and the soft benefits are those which cannot be easily quantified, like employee morale, customer satisfaction, etc. So the project team will also work on a cost benefit analysis, which would include the approximate project cost, the project benefits, and the project gain. And there are certain pointers which the project team needs to remember when they execute the Six Sigma project. The first one, of course, the leadership support is very much critical for the successful closure of a Six Sigma project. And all the activities pertaining to a Six Sigma project exercise needs to be compiled in a format called RACI format. That is, for each and every activity, we need to identify the people who are responsible for executing it, the person who is accountable for the activity, the people who needs to be consulted for performing that activity, and the stakeholder or the list of stakeholders who needs to be informed about the status of that activity. So while there can be multiple people responsible for executing a particular activity, there can be only one approver, meaning there can be only one accountable person. And then during the Six Sigma project, the project team should not entertain any ad hoc requests. So any addition, deletion, or modification to the existing list of activities needs to be carried out only with the prior approval provided by the leadership team. And all these changes needs to be communicated to the relevant stakeholders as per the communication plan detailed in the change management protocol document. And then the project team, once they get the approval from the leadership team to proceed with the project exercise, will create a macro level or a high level process flow called SIPOC, which would help us to link the supplier with input, with process, with output and customer. So SIPOC, as we all know, is primarily a scoping tool. So it would help us to understand what is the start and the end point of the process area which has been considered for necessary improvement as part of the project exercise. So one more important thing that we understood was when we create a SIPOC diagram, we will not go in that sequence. So we will create or depict the process first, and then we will depict all the other items in SIPOC. And one more advantage that we can get when we create a SIPOC diagram is that we would be able to understand whether the input quality is the primary reason for the bad output quality or not. If that is the case, we don't have to really work on any process improvement. We can address the issue by identifying the supplier who has supplied me with that faulty input, and we can either warn that supplier or even change that supplier. And finally, as part of the define phase, we will construct a micro level as-is process flow for identifying the lean opportunities existing in the process. And as we all know, process flow or flow chart is the tool which would help me to identify the stoppages in the process. And the as-is process flow is nothing but the depiction of the process as it is being executed in the shop floor. And that is the process flow we need to consider for any improvement. And then if multiple teams are working on a particular process, then we can also think about coming up with a swim lane diagram so that we are able to identify the bottleneck activity and the team that is performing that bottleneck or the activity which has some issues. And during the define phase, we could understand that affinity diagram as a tool would be used quite extensively, right? So affinity diagram is nothing but a depiction of consolidating the elements belonging to or consolidating the elements having similar characteristics under a particular category, right? So affinity diagram is the tool that we will use quite extensively as part of the define phase. Now we will move on to the next phase, which is the measure phase. This is the second phase in the DMAIC approach. The measure phase is slightly lengthy because measure phase is where, as I told you, you'll also get introduced to the statistical tools and techniques. So we will discuss about quite a good number of concepts as part of the measure phase. But then what is the primary objective of this measure phase? So the measure phase, as the name itself suggests, is all about measuring the baseline performance of the CTQ metric, right? So in that example that we saw when we prepared the project charter, so how did we know that the current performance of the CTQ metric is 96%? So it was only after measuring the CTQ metric performance considering the baseline period. So we could arrive at the baseline measure. So this is exactly what we will do as part of the measure phase. So we will baseline the CTQ metric performance. And not only that, we will also arrive at the baseline sigma level at the end of the measure phase. So yesterday itself, we would have discussed about the sigma level. So sigma level is a metric which would actually indicate the quality or the efficiency levels of a process. And this sigma level is calculated based on the defect rate or the yield rate or the accuracy rate. So one of these two matrices can be considered for calculating the sigma level. So at the end of the measure phase, we will also learn how to calculate the sigma level and we will arrive at the baseline sigma level. So this baseline CTQ metric performance will be indicated in terms of sigma level. And that is what we would call as the baseline sigma level. So since the measure phase, we are going to measure the CTQ performance in terms of some numerical value, it's important for us to understand some of the basic data concepts, right? But then what exactly is data? So data nowadays, is referred as a text formats, right? So nowadays people would call even the text format as a data. But then in Six Sigma, we would specifically define data as a numerical expression of any activity. So if you are able to express the performance of a process or an activity in numerical terms, and that numerical value is what we would call as data. So data is numerical expression of any activity. But as I told you, in general practice, even the text formats will be called as data. But as far as Six Sigma is concerned, we will stick on to the numerical expression of any activity as the data. So this is a beautiful sentence. So without data, there can be any number of opinions or perceptions about a process performance or about an individual's performance. But with data, there can be only one conclusion. So when you have not measured anything, right, to reflect the process performance, so some group of people may say that the process performance is excellent. Some people may say that the process performance is average. Some people may say that the process performance is mediocre. But then, if you have measured the accuracy percentage of the process as 96%, means it is nothing more or nothing less than 96%. So with data, we can always come up with a conclusion. But without data, it will give room for various opinions or perceptions about a process performance. So you could understand this particular aspect, right? So when we have the individual's performance measured in numerical terms, it is always easy for us to conduct these appraisal meetings. So as a manager, it becomes very, very easy for us to conduct all these appraisal meetings at the end of the year. So these are the performance reviews, right? You will conduct with your own teams. So without data, so what will happen? The subordinate will always say that my performance has been extremely good during the past year. But as a manager, you will contest that claim, saying that your performance was not all that great. But both the parties will not have uh, the data to, speak with any kind of conviction, right? So at the end of the day, you will get or as a manager, you will provide a lesser rating to the subordinate, and the subordinate also will not feel happy about the rating given to him or to her. But then if the performance has been tracked in numerical terms, right, from the beginning of the year, the associate, the concerned employee, would be able to understand how well he or she has performed, right? And based on that, the person can also anticipate what sort of rating will be provided, correct? And during the course of the year, at any given point of time, the individual will have access to his or her own data and can really understand and what has been the performance so far. And if at all any course correction is required, so that can be done before the completion of the year. right? So this is the advantage of tracking the performance in terms of some numerical value. So that is what we would call as data. So we will always be able to come up with some conclusive evidence about a process performance or an individual's performance, right? So this will be very, very useful during the appraisal time. So nowadays, you might be having the individual performances tracked in terms of some numerical value. So as and when we have these appraisal meetings, so it will be quite straightforward, right? So the manager will know, what is the performance given by that associate, and the associate or the employee also would know what is the kind of rating that will be awarded for his or her performance during the past year, right? So there will not be any heartburns, there will not be any heated debates or discussions taking place during the appraisal meeting. So that is the strength of expressing in terms of some numerical value. That is what we would call as data. But then it's important for us to understand that whatever data we are considering should be totally unbiased. So what do you mean by a biased data? Say, for example, there is a quality inspection team, right, which is inspecting each and every sample unit and then finalizing whether the sample unit is defective or non-defective. Suppose the inspection team, in order to show the operations team in a better light to the management, decides that they are not going to consider the defective sample units for accuracy calculation. What will be the accuracy percentage of that operations team month after month? It will always be 100%, right? Because the quality inspection team has decided that they are not going to show or they are not going to consider the defective sample units for accuracy calculation. So in that case, they will be considering only the non-defective sample units for accuracy calculation, and the accuracy percentage will always be 100% month after month. But this 100%, is it a valid data? Definitely not. It is a biased data, right? So it is not a valid data, it is a biased data. So if you are going to perform analysis with this biased data, then it is like digging up a garbage. So when we dig up a garbage, what we will get? We will get garbage in some other form. So that is what we would call as garbage in, garbage out kind of a situation. So when we deal with some biased data, it is like digging up a garbage. And what is the resultant output that you would get? Garbage in some other form. That means you will get some incorrect results, right? So that has to be completely avoided. So there is a merit in expressing something in numerical terms, but we also need to ensure that whatever data we are collating is absolutely valid. And there is an exercise for us to validate the correctness of the data collated, and that exercise name is measurement system analysis, which we are going to see as part of the measure phase. So we are also going to look at an exercise which would help us to validate the correctness of the data that we have collated for the CTQ metric. So the name of that exercise is measurement system analysis. So we will look at how to perform that exercise and how to analyze the data in order to validate the correctness of the data we have collated for the CTQ metric, right? So that will be at a later stage. But for now, let us look at the data collection plan. So what is this data collection plan? This data collection plan needs to be compiled by the project lead, and it has to be submitted to the leadership of the organization. They need to provide the approval. So when they provide the approval to this data collection plan prepared by the project team lead, so it serves as a approval document for the process team lead to provide necessary data to the project team representative. So we need to remember that the project team may not belong to the process where the business problem has been identified. So the project team might actually belong to some other process team, right? It's quite possible. So the project lead or the project team members may actually belong to some other process team. So they may not belong to the same process team where the business problem has been identified. So that being the case, it is it would be very difficult for the process team lead to hand over the data to the project team representative without any proper approval, because data is supposed to be a confidential information. It cannot be just like that handed over to any individual. So the process team lead needs to have a proper approval provided by the leadership team for handing over the necessary or the relevant data to the project team representative. So this data collection plan will serve as an approval document for the process team lead to hand over necessary data to the project team representative. So that's why I told you each and every exercise that we would perform as part of the Six Sigma project has a definite purpose, has a definite meaning. Now let us look at what are all the elements that you would compile as part of the data collection plan. So first and foremost, we will identify the CTQ metric along with the operational definition. So this you would have already done as part of the define phase. So once the priority business problem is identified, we would have also identified the relevant CTQ metric along with the operational definition. So what is operational definition as we discussed? So this is nothing but the calculation logic that the project team is going to adopt for calculating this CTQ metric performance. So how the CTQ metric performance will be calculated? So the operational definition will contain the calculation logic that the team is going to adopt for performing the CTQ metric calculation. So in case if any of the stakeholder has any objection with regard to the calculation logic that is going to be adopted for calculating the CTQ metric, they can raise it at the beginning of the project exercise itself. But after the calculation is done, after the baseline performance is calculated for the CTQ metric, if someone is going to raise an objection that the calculation methodology that the team has adopted is completely incorrect, then the team would find it very difficult to actually make the necessary course correction, right? Even if they need to kind of discard the entire data, the entire calculations, and then they need to, start calculating once again, right? If that objection is a valid objection. So that has to be avoided. So if the operational definition is also provided at the beginning itself, so all concerned stakeholders will be able to clearly understand what is the calculation logic that will be adopted by the project team while calculating this CTQ metric performance. So as I told you yesterday, if it is a time related metric, whether the calculation will be done as per the cycle time logic or as per the lead time logic, right? And then we also need to identify the baseline period for which the base data for the CTQ metric needs to be collated. And as I mentioned when we discussed about the project charter elements, so I told you very clearly that we need to consider the latest 1 year period as the baseline period so that it will average out all these, process performance fluctuations. And then we also need to identify the time frame during which the project team member will visit the process team to collect the base data. So the baseline period may pertain to January 2025 to December 2025. But the project team representative who has been entrusted with the responsibility of collecting the data will be visiting the process team maybe during the second week of January 2026 to collect the base data for the CTQ metric. So the second week of January 2026 needs to be mentioned as pointer number 3. Clear? So while pointer number 2 will be mentioned as January 2025 to December 2025. For pointer number 3, we will mention second week of January 2026 as the timeline where the project team representative will visit the process team lead and collect the base data for the CTQ metric, right? So as I told you, the team members, the project team members will be provided with a specific role and responsibility. So there will be a project team member who will be entrusted with the task of collating the data and performing necessary analysis. So this person will have a flair for dealing with numbers. So that person will be given the responsibility of collating the base data and also analyzing the base data, right? So according to the strength of the project team members, each one of them will be provided some kind of a responsibility. So someone who is good at documenting will be given the task of coming up with the PPT document, right? Documenting the entire project exercise. Someone who is good at coordinating with members will be given the task of, dealing with all the relevant stakeholders and arranging for the meetings, etc. So depending on the strength of the individual team members, so we will also assign a specific task and responsibility for that team member. So there will be a team member who will be entrusted with the task of collating the data for the CTQ metric, and that project team member will visit the process team maybe during the second week of January 2026 to collect the base data for the CTQ metric. So the second week of Jan 2026 will have to be written against pointer number 3. And then the important one, identify the team member, the project team member who has been entrusted with the responsibility of collecting the data from the process team. So how the process team lead would know that he is the person to whom the data needs to be provided. So the identification of that project team member is also very, very important. So that will also be part of the data collection plan. So the project team member will carry some ID number or some identity card. So those details, that roll number or the ID number needs to be provided as pointer number 4 so that it becomes easy for the project or the process team lead to identify that this is the person to whom the data needs to be provided. And then we also need to identify the source of collecting the data. So the data, whether it is to be compiled from Excel files or whether the data is going to be pulled out in a report format from a workflow tool. So the source of data collection needs to be clearly mentioned as pointer number 5. And pointer number 6, we also need to identify the graphical format that will be used for representing the CTQ metric performance. So we have various graphical formats which we are going to see as part of the measure phase, like histogram, bar chart, pie chart, line chart, etc. So which graphical format will be used for representing the CTQ metric performance needs to be mentioned as part of the data collection plan. So this data collection plan will be prepared by the project lead and will be sent to the leadership for obtaining their approval so that this approved data collection plan can be provided to the process team lead, and the process team lead should have no hesitation in handing over the necessary data to the project team representative, right? Fine. So let us stop here. So we'll continue with our discussions regarding the measure phase uh, from Monday onwards. So as I told you, we will start working on these statistical exercises from Monday onwards, from the 4th day of this training session. So as I informed yesterday, so I will send the link for downloading the free trial version of the Minitab software immediately after today's sessions are closed. So I will send you the link, but then you can try out, downloading the free trial version. In case you are not able to do so, it's absolutely fine. We'll be able to manage with the Excel and manual formula. And again, I repeat, for all those, statistical exercises which are likely to be asked as questions in the final assessment, I've also provided you with the template. So in case you find it difficult to understand the calculation logic, no worries at all. So you just need to understand how to use the template and interpret the answers. And then I will send you the first set of quiz questions, which you can attempt during the weekend. So this is called as weekend quiz. So the first set of quiz questions, pertaining to the portions that we covered during these 3 days of training session will be sent to you. So this is not a mandatory exercise, as I told you on the very first day. So this is for your own benefit. So this will help you to revise all these portions that we covered during the first 3 days of training session. And this will also help you to prepare well for the final assessment. So please do attempt answering these quiz questions. So you need not send the answers to me, you can retain the answers with you. The correct answers for all these quiz questions will be sent on Monday. So Monday afternoon. So you can then validate with your own answers. And in case of any clarifications required, you can always connect with me. Right? So have a great weekend and we will connect at the same time on Monday evening. So tomorrow and day after, as you all know, we will not have any training session. So we will connect for the 4th day session on Monday evening. So till such time, take care, good night, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, sir.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Sridhar.
Thank you.
Thank you.